Thank you. Okay, first thing on our agenda tonight is to review the agenda, so I'm going to turn it over to Jeremy at this time to let us know what we got coming up here.
Okay, so today we have the Citizens Filming Officer Policy Review. We have U of O EPD Intergovernmental Agreement. There was a question asked about that in the February meeting, and so we're going to have a small response to that. We have a CCTV proposal discussion continuation. And last, we have the Vehicle Pursuit Policy revisions coming back. We're going to see how that's implemented in training. I have a couple of announcements that I would like to share. One is that Commissioner Raquel Hecht will be joining us in April. Commissioner Jim Garner, he sends his apologies because he's out sick. He's got a cough and he didn't want to share that with us. There was a response to Commissioner Surratt's request from the last commission meeting regarding video and public records request. That was in the last Friday's Police Commission newsletter. So if anyone has a chance to review that, please do. There was also the Deadly Use of Force educational opportunity is coming up here on the 15th for the police commissioners who would like to attend that. There are still openings. So please feel free to see me at break or afterward or shoot me an email.
Can you remind us what that is?
Sure. So the Deadly Use of Force, there's a simulator upstairs that that takes you through some scenarios of how to use the firearms and in what circumstances you would use the firearms. So you have the opportunity to kind of be able to see how that works, and that's available for the police commissioner. If any of you would like to attend.
Thank you. It's also about use of force too, and the physics involved in apprehending people and things that people might not understand about how things are done, and might clarify some misconceptions or some ideas, or be more informed about it. So I'm taking advantage of it. I hope that you folks have a spare time Sunday, you might be able to let Jeremy know and he'll get you in there in a slot.
What time is it going on?
It's all day, but there's time slots for 2 hours. 2 hours, isn't it?
Yeah, and so far the 11 to 1 slot is the only slot that's full. So 1 to 3, 3 to 5, so on and so forth.
Yeah. Okay, so at this time on the agenda, we need to turn the meeting over to our Vice Chair, Tara Miller, for public comment. Anybody who has not, oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Bob.
You tell.
I have one person signed up to speak. If you'd like to speak and you have not filled out a form, please grab a blue form from over here, fill it out and hand it to me. You'll have 3 minutes to speak, and when you're finished, I will hold the sign telling you have 20 seconds remaining and your time is up. Carol Berg Caldwell, welcome to the table.
Thank you, Carol Berg Caldwell, 2510 Augusta. Regarding agenda item Citizens Filming Officers Policy, a few thoughts and thank yous. Thank you for being a voice, eyes, and ears for community and police who are community, recommending policies for Chief Kearns to consider. Thank you, Chief Kearns, for often expressing respect for the work of this body, interest in hearing from other community voices too. I thank Sergeant Crompton for his comment in yesterday's RG. He said, "It's just a matter of respect," referencing that some civilian recorders had allegedly shoved cameras in his face, though other recorders hadn't. Straight away, I thought how respect is a two-way street. I respect and appreciate every EPD officer who respects their own sworn oath to respect constitutional rights of any and all. Recording police is a constitutionally protected right as upheld by high courts. I especially thank and respect those 3 people involved in separate incidents in recent months who who expressed in open court proceedings or to me as an independent court observer their deep-seated beliefs that they had been punished by police for recording them. I filed 3 third-party complaints hastily dismissed and closed by the police auditor. There will be more follow-up for sure to this story. Your deliberations tonight is part of that rest of the story. Perhaps one day EPD may finally have a policy to help guide officers who do encounter civilian recorders of frequent occurrence. Lastly, the RG article reports that you are working from a generic draft. While a generic draft may be an adequate starting place, I hope the end product will be a good fit for Eugene. I believe, and many others I've conferred with also believe, that there are some red flags in this generic draft. One example, civil disobedience protests are common in Eugene. This draft appears to indicate that cameras at such protests and even non-protest events could be seized by police to view and copy if any potential alleged criminal activity is captured in the recordings. While some may regard civil disobedience as criminal, many Americans, I'm sure, are quite grateful for those civilly disobedient riffraff patriots 2.5 centuries ago who threw tea into the Boston Harbor, laying the groundwork to free America from tyranny. Please do not rush this and give more attention to this. Do not make a final report, I hope, tonight, because this matters so much to police and community that they serve. At your last meeting, some commissioners indicated an interest in a public town hall forum for more community input, perhaps more buy-in from police and community. Please help that happen. I am so looking for your discussion tonight, and I thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have, hoping to speak, Janet Brooke. Janet, you want to have a seat at the table here when you're done setting that up. If there's anybody else in the audience that wishes to speak and has not signed up to speak, please fill out a blue slip. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. When you have 20 seconds remaining, I'll hold this sign and the sign when you're done. Go ahead.
So I just heard that you guys are considering rules that would affect people doing videography in your town, and I wanted to express a deep concern because I don't know if you realize that our founding fathers created freedom of the press because it's a checks and balance system. Independent media and videographers are able to create a second eye on a situation and be able to create media that can bring out things that are not okay, that as a community, hopefully we all want to know about. If you think that video cameras posted in different locations will make up for that, that's not true, because a videographer will put themselves in a position to get video that you aren't going to get from afar. And I know that it costs $25 a piece to get a CD from the city, so it's basically saying anybody without money has not access to the media that you guys are creating that has to do with the security of our downtown area. And I really feel it's infringing on my constitutional rights to say I don't have the right of freedom of the press. And I can't understand why we would control people's ability to take video. There's laws already in place if you are getting in the way or if you're disruptive, or you can deal with things with laws that are already in place. You don't need to create new laws that obstruct our ability to create a safe community and have independent media. I mean, that is a huge, big deal. It's part of our constitutional right for a reason. And I feel really like I hope that you guys seriously look at the situation and realize that this isn't just a small decision, just an ordinary moment. This is the kind of thing that decides how free we are in this country. And I don't feel free if I'm not allowed to do what I think is my constitutional right, which is go downtown and film things that maybe I can put a different light on. I mean, why would we not want to let videographers film unless we're afraid that maybe we're going to end up in a situation like what happened in New York City, where Ferguson was clearly filmed, and we all know about that because of an independent media person that was able to share that. And if you're not hiding anything, why would you want to stop us from being able to film?
Thank you.
Okay, there are no more public comments? Have one more?
So, thank you. Tito, how do you say your last name?
Chavez Nguyen.
Thank you.
Sorry, I
No,
forgot
that's
to
okay.
phonetically put it
I just
out.
wanted to make sure I got it right. Go ahead and start whenever you're ready.
Well, first off, I want to thank the city and the Eugene Police Department for opening this up for the public to come and say some comments. That being said, you know, an important issue in our time right now, especially for minorities, is transparency. You know, there's a lot of things that we see in the United States that gives us cause and concern. One of the reasons I love the Eugene Police Department is in their mission, they have several things clearly listed out, but the first and foremost is public trust. And I think the best way to do that is to allow a citizen to lawfully do something without restrictions. Restricting a person who's engaged in a lawful activity under the color of the law is something that should be supported. It should not be supported. It should be supported that they can film and do whatever they want in the America that they live. I mean, they're a citizen, they're allowed to do that. Those restrictions kind of show an underlying current that, you know, public trust is not there. We need to hold back these individuals because X, Y, and Z. Now, the Nation Press Photographers Association says most jurisdictions have a limit on the distance, and the limit is the physical interference of a police officer. There's not 100 feet, there's not 50 feet, there's not 25 feet. And I think that's an important note. I mean, we need to understand that we respect the police officers. Of course, police officers respect the citizens that they're serving. And something to just think about, I mean, a video camera videotaping you doesn't have to be a scary thing. It's something that should be supported. It can validate facts for both the police officer and for the person that is being arrested or detained or for whatever reason. So, you know, I think hopefully you guys consider this and consider the Eugene Police Department's mission statements of leveraging technology in an effective and efficient way for policing. This is not only their technology, but citizens' technologies as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Having no more parties wishing to speak, I'll conclude the public comments and turn the time back over to Bob.
Thank you. So our next section is public comments is commission comments, and Claire had her hand up before anybody else, so I'm going to call on her first.
Thanks. I very much appreciate the public comment. There is always opportunity for public comment at these meetings. There are always public meetings. This is not a special exception. And in response to the concerns about the policy regarding filming of officers' activities, I think maybe there's a misperception, and I particularly want to address the second speaker. We are not looking to create a policy to control citizens' ability to film. That is not the purpose of the policy. The purpose of the policy is to provide guidance to police on how they can ensure public safety while they're doing their job. So we are not creating a new law. We are talking about policy for how police officers conduct themselves. So we're not creating a new law to impede on citizens' constitutional rights to film what's happening in a public space. And I don't think, although we're still talking about this policy in the draft form, as far as I'm concerned, there's not an interest in creating a measurable distance that every officer can say, you must stand 10 feet away, 15 feet away, 20 feet away. That, one, isn't practical, and two, wouldn't accomplish what we're trying to do. So right now, officers already have the authority to control the scene when they are talking to someone, trying to give a traffic ticket, or there's some more potentially dangerous situation. And in my view, by creating a policy, we actually give officers some framework within which to do that controlling of a scene. Right now, it's really just left up strictly to officers' discretion. And my feeling is that by having a well-vetted policy, vetted by the community, we can create a framework so officers know what our expectations are of them as a community in dealing with citizens' lawful activity to record police activity.
Thank you, Claire. Our auditor, Mark Isner, has asked for a moment to clarify something, so I'd like to go ahead and let him speak.
Sorry. Just take a minute. It's not entirely unusual for the commission to have concerns or issues about things that might come up over the course of time. This is one of those times where I'd like to take the opportunity to make sure that you do have all of the information. Again, it's pretty rare when the decisions of the CRB and our auditor's office are discussed here, but it's important and we're fine with that. And it does involve the policy on video recordings. And for some of you that have been around for a while, now I need my reading glasses for my notes, less than 3 months from the time that I originally was hired, we brought a case forward in which a young lady was filming an arrest. And both the officer and the supervisor, we brought forward allegations of misconduct because she was arrested for filming officers. Those allegations were sustained. And so we have been aware and in tune with those complaints if they do come in. So we wanted to make that clear. It's not something new. I know that there's a few cases out there that have been discussed and were carefully reviewed by our office. Were reviewed by our chair and vice chair to determine whether or not it should go forward to the review board. And even had a discussion with one of the people who serves on this commission about those particular cases. Regrettably, in the state of Oregon, ICVs and things aren't common public record, and that's not within my jurisdiction. But what is to review these cases. In 2 of the cases, which involved actual arrest, in which recording was one could reasonably say the primary focus of the situation. We determined that there was no policies that were violated and that probable cause existed. I think the newspaper referred to these being under arraignment, and in fact, in both cases, the individuals were convicted. And the irony of one of them was there was about 20 people actually filming the incident. Only one got so close as to what I would consider a reasonable person would consider to be interfering, and that person was arrested and convicted. In the second incident, the individual who was arrested was interfering with the arrest of a violent person who allegedly had committed road rage with a gun and still had the gun on his person when the other person decided that they wanted to film the incident. My comfort level in something like that would have been far greater than where the officers were asking him to be, quite honestly, when there is a weapon involved. The third incident being discussed was in fact a traffic stop that had nothing to do with the filming of the stop after the officer decided to impound the vehicle. He noticed one of the passengers in the vehicle with an iPad and asked her if she was recording the incident, recording his voice, and she replied that she was, and he advised her that you're supposed to tell people when you are recording their voices. I appreciate that the state law was probably written about the time of wiretapping and Nixon, and certainly I wish the state legislature would take an opportunity to revisit that whole issue with the changes in technology. Nevertheless, it was an advisement of the law. Was it necessary? Probably not, but it wasn't a policy violation. And it did not impact his decision to impound the vehicle because he had already made that decision, because the owner of the vehicle was unavailable to take possession or even communicate about the vehicle. So I wanted to clarify those for you, because again, I know media doesn't always have an opportunity to have, doesn't have the column inches to put in everything, and so they have to decide what they want to do. But I know that some of our decisions get panned, and but I want you to be assured that all these things have been looked at, and in fact are regularly looked at since 2009, since the year that I got here. And I think most of us realize that, and this is quite frankly a perfect example where the same thing is being recorded from 6 different pieces of technology. And so I think nearly everything we do and nearly everything police do, and if you've ever had the pleasure of going out on party patrol, and if there's 20 students around and an arrest is occurring, there's 20 students with their smartphones out. So I appreciate that you're taking up an opportunity to define parameters. It certainly will make it easier for me to have a policy with which I can cite specifically, as opposed to what we did, in fact, in that previous case in 2009 was the allegations were knowledge of the law. So again, I appreciate your time, and just wanted to clarify the issues, because I think that it's important for you to understand that our office and CRB does take these cases seriously and does do a lot of work on them. So, thank you.
Thank you for the information, Mr. Gessner. And I'll continue with commissioner comments at this point. Does anybody wish to go next, or should we go around the table? Jesse, would you like that?
Yeah. Actually, could I ask Mr. Gissner a question?
Certainly.
Maybe I should wait till we're discussing the policy, but I'll at least throw it out and I'll leave it to you if you want to talk about it right now or maybe later on. If you have a policy that says that officers can tell people to move back a reasonable distance to record, and then you end up reviewing a potential policy violation, how are you going to consider whether it was reasonable?
I'll go ahead and ask you to save that for comments if you can. Are you going to be able to stay? Because I really do want to get into discussion about this.
And I can answer really briefly.
Okay.
Hypotheticals are just hypotheticals. And so we just have to review things on a case-by-case basis. So, for example, again, someone with a gun is going to be different than someone who might be drunk and disorderly. So it's on a case-by-case basis. If there's a gun involved, I would want it just for the safety of everybody involved. I would want an awful lot of distance. But for someone who's intoxicated, I don't need that same kind of distance. So on a complaint basis, it's just on a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
Thank you. And Jesse, you want to continue with anything?
Just thank you to everybody that spoke. I agree with Councilor Surratt's comments.
Okay. Thank you. George?
Kind of reminds me of the time when you whisper something in somebody's ear and it goes around. Was here, if you were here last month in the discussion, there is not a chance of not being able to record an officer doing his job. That it wasn't even a possibility, a consideration. It's really, I don't know how it got so far out there that the police commission was going to decide that. It's kind of kind of shocked me. It is strictly for the safety of the officer and the safety of the people videotaping it. And there is, it would be nice to say so many feet, but that's impossible depending, like Mr. Gisner said, whether the person has a gun. That's probably going to increase the distance, but the officer also, when doing his job, to have somebody right in his face distracts from his job, and it's scary for the officer. So it's for both the safety of the officer and the safety of the people around him, and that is the whole intent. And the intent is not to violate any rights of being able to film what's going on. That's so far off base. I don't know how that got started. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Cameron?
I had the opportunity to attend the city council meeting on February 23rd to hear the city council approve the consent agenda, which included the new police commissioner who's been appointed. So it was sort of a non-event, but still good to attend to be certain about that we had our new member appointed. So that's all I have. I'm really looking forward to the discussion on the agenda items today. We've got some really great stuff that we're working on, and looking forward to it. Thanks.
Thank you, Tim. I guess I want to thank everybody that came out tonight, too. I know this got wide dissemination throughout the media, and that's a good thing. The more information goes out to the public, the better chance we get for people to come and speak to us and give us your opinion. I know the administration values that opinion, and as well as this commission. When I heard some of the comments tonight, I was a little distressed because I think, again, I don't know how things get so far afield, but you know, we're here to try to make things better for everyone, not to try to keep people from doing things. That's not our intent. So keeping that in mind, I hope the commissioners understand that this probably is something that's very important to the community, and just the thought of restricting or changing something causes people to become very nervous and worried about their rights. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. I also want to caution us about something. We're getting a little bit of far afield of our work plan. We have a certain time frame in order to complete this. We have a retreat coming up in May to work on our next work plan. Perhaps some of these items that are floating around in your heads might be something we can add to next year's work plan, because we need to complete this. We're under charter to do that, and we have to, submit that to council and then report that we did do what we said we were going to do. So I think it's important that we stick to our plan and try to hold down the extraneous things that do come up during the meeting. I mean, these things are important, don't get me wrong, but I believe we need to stick with our plan if we can. Wise use of our time is what's important right now till May. Okay.
Yeah. I guess I've sort of pushed on this to have a policy, and the reason for this is that we have a reality out there. I mean, people are recording the police all the time, and so my concern on this was to remove the gray area that an officer might decide they didn't want to be recorded and tell somebody to stop. So that removes that, or at least this policy, if we finish it, will remove that. In other words, that citizens have an absolute right to record the police, but they do not have a right to interfere with the activities of the police or to create a dangerous situation. And so that's the kind of sticking point. How do you construct language so that you protect both the citizens and the officers? In other words, under a circumstance where the officer's attention is diverted from their activities because there are people recording and being fairly aggressive about their recording, that creates a situation which is not good for the officers or for the public. And so the object is to try to find some kind of language that gives officers some guidance in that particular area. So essentially two things. One is to remove the ambiguity as to whether citizens have a right, and the second one is to better define and in other words, give guidance to officers as to, how to handle these situations. So I don't see, although I will, we will probably talk about it further, I don't see that there's an issue about the police confiscating cameras at demonstrations or similar things like that. But those are good things to bring up, because it will make us mindful of these issues as we deliberate on this particular language. And so thank you for all the comments. I found them very helpful.
I just want to thank everybody for their comments. Those are really important for us to listen and to hear what everybody is thinking out there, because there always is some different perceptions. As we can see, sometimes they go a little bit further than we thought they should. And I think, as Commissioner Surratt said, is that we had no intention of ever saying that people could not record the police. And I think it's great to point out that under the chief's direction, that Sergeant Lowen came up with a draft policy where I think he says 3 times in there that it is the citizen's right to film the police. And I think that's important. It's coming from the police department that is saying that we know it's their right to film us. And I think that's important. So, thank you.
I'd also like to thank the public for your comments. I was concerned that there's a rumor out there somewhere that this policy we're discussing is also the same policy for CCTV downtown. Those are 2 separate ideas. And I haven't heard anything at this table that would suggest that either of them is intended to in any way infringe on the media's right to record or any citizen's right to record, nor be a substitute for anything the media might say record downtown. So I just wanted to make that clear. Rumors get started, people understandably react to them. If I had heard what you thought you heard, I would probably be sitting where you are saying, that can't be right. So given what you thought you heard, I think you said the right thing, and you brought to our attention the fact that there's a lot of misinformation about this. But I do want to thank everyone for coming out on this topic. And I think we've discussed here at the table the idea of possibly having town halls further down the road on this. I know for myself, the way this would work best if those civil rights organizations that are helping people train about how to safely and legally record police, we're sitting down with the beat officer supervisors and getting on the same page so that the problem doesn't have to keep work out at each incident with the same groups of people. So that's just a thought, is that there would be a cooperative approach to this.
Thank you, Edward. Anybody have anything else? Claire, did you have something? Oh, James, we didn't go around that way, sorry.
Not a problem, not a problem.
Started in the middle this time. Okay.
Yeah, I'm just happy to be here, yes. First, I'd like to thank Mark for coming over, spend some time and shedding some insight as to what probably came about this, because I'm unaware of some of these issues that have been brought forward by the public and stuff. And I do appreciate the public being here. That's very important. I wish we had more public engagement at all of the meetings and stuff, and just some of the things that kind of, pique people's interest and stuff. Certainly, I was not aware of any type of widespread abuse or anything like that. I do know that my intent, my purpose here is to make sure that when the officer comes to work, the officer goes home the same way. And the people in the public that they service, that they service them in the right way as well, with dignity and respect. So there are some gray areas, and every situation, again, is different. So we had already discussed, what is a safe distance. And I would argue that it would be the safest distance that an officer feels comfortable. If you have someone, the incident about the gun, and then you're talking about one where someone is probably inebriated and stuff, and you have to deal with them and stuff, and I know as a former police officer of incidents where, we had gone to a scene, domestic violence, and the wife wanted the husband out the house, and he didn't want to go, so you have to get physical, and the wife responded with a frying pan over the husband's head. So it is a very dangerous business and stuff, So while it is the right of civilians, of the public to, record. So that's not, I encourage that. And probably more often, the police officers probably encourage it as well, because it works both ways. So to get rid of the fear and stuff, we have to start with some kind of a draft in order to work some type of policy out. So if you come and you have nothing to begin with, I don't think that, we individually, we have a lot of time to sit back and craft a policy or anything like that. So I think that what EPD has done is a starting block, and it's not a law, but it's something that kind of guide officers, and especially with officers. Every incident is different. And, I would just say that we all have responsibilities, whether it's the officer or whether it's the person that's doing the filming, to make sure that they are at a safe distance too. So it goes all the way around. So, thank you.
Claire?
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to respond to Tamara's mentioning of Raquel Hecht being appointed, and I felt really bad that you left, because at the end of the night, I did actually call out the appointment and thanked you for coming, even though you were gone by then, and Chief Kearns as well, and noted that I was excited to have Raquel join the commission, and also noted it would be nice that there'd be another woman at the table with us. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Claire. Well, moving on, we have the review of the minutes, and I'll ask Jeremy to, well, you've actually supplied everybody, so I don't know what I'm thinking here. Anybody see any corrections that need to be made to the minutes that you've got them in your packet? And Edward, you have one.
Just a tiny typo, it's on the last page in the second sentence. Policy opportunity to speak not just to a citizen who is getting too close, needs two O's. Too close.
Thank you. We'll make that correction.
Thank you.
Okay. I'll take a motion to approve the minutes as corrected. Cameron?
I'll second it.
Second by Joe. All right.
I was
Need
going
your
to
group
say the
tonight.
date,
Thank you.
February 12th, okay.
All right. All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. Minutes are approved. Moving on to the policy review, and I'll ask Matt Nolan to come up and review once again the policy that we saw last week, last month, I'm sorry, and answer any questions that anybody might have. Did you make any changes from last week?
Yes, from last month, rather?
Last month, yeah, I keep saying.
Yeah, if I remember last month, the request was made for me to draft a EPD-specific policy. So basically, we have the formatting and the Eugene-ified version. You guys looked at several examples. I think we had a chance to discuss it. We liked the IACP model policy, so we pulled a lot from that. I wrote a memorandum to help accompany or procedure review of the policy language itself. It's something I'm going to start doing each month when we give you a new policy or something to talk about. Really, Ms. Claire kind of said it all very, very well. Doesn't mean I'm not going to talk.
Stole your thunder.
But that's exactly, I had a chance to talk to a lot of media outlets today. There was a lot of media interest about what we're doing, or what y'all are doing tonight, and so I had a chance to talk to them about why it's important, the significance of it, and I think everybody at the table is aware enough about police issues, not just here, but throughout the nation, to know that these types of issues are important to the community, and they're important to get right from the department to the community. So having something codified after a process like this helps when you have an instance where maybe there was an act where the officer, maybe not intentionally, but does act improperly or in violation of the policy. It helps to have this kind of stuff on the front end of that, because as we learn through the media, these kind of things can be disastrous sometimes, or spend plenty of time in the news cycle hopper. And that's not good for departments, it's not good for the community, so. I tried to pull out the big points about what is important about the policy that, we've given pretty much unambiguously the permission, the affirmation of the right of the people in the community to record police while they're doing their official activities. That there are reasonable restrictions that we as police haven't put in, that the courts have put those in, and they've allowed for us as actors of the government to adhere or confine people to those reasonable restrictions of their constitutional rights. We've enumerated what those are in the policy, and that this policy yet it says you guys are taking the cut at this, but it will go to some legal review that is through the district attorney's office and the city attorney's office. So I've noted that the arrest procedures comport with all the Fourth Amendment fundamentals that we understand, of course, but there may be some fine-tuning language, of course, because when lawyers read about the Fourth Amendment and I talk to you about the Fourth Amendment, we're in the same vein, but it's probably they have some specific tweaks they may place on that, but that's not what you guys are going after, really. So, but the idea in the policies, is the camera as witness, not as an implement to instigate or participate in the situation. I think that's if we come to if you guys come to an area where the policy says that, as far as I'm concerned, that's successful. I'll be quiet and you can I'll answer any quick questions you might have.
That's what I was going to have you do. Yeah. Does anybody have questions for Matt regarding the policy? Things they don't understand or would like to clarify? Please say now, James.
Yeah, I was just wondering about the draft. I see here on page 1 we had definition.
Yes, sir.
And it says capturing of images, audio, or both by means of video camera, cell phone, audio recorder, or other device. I would ask that you consider instead of other devices or something wording language to the effect that other image capturing technologies. And I think that would take care of all this, because you talk about drones and all these other things that are out, and the technology and stuff would, in my opinion, will encompass all of that, so that there's no point going back over and adding in another line or anything like that. Just my thought.
Yes, sir. Thanks.
Does anybody have any objection to that? No? Okay, we'll ask Matt to maybe add that language. Jesse, you were next, and who's after that?
A couple of questions. On the last page of the policy, 41552 sub D.
D, David?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no exception to the warrant requirement except where there's exigent circumstances, and the description of the exigent circumstances is in italics. Is there a reason for that? Is that some of the language you expect might get modified?
It might get modified, and it's just to help call attention to the reader, namely a police officer. Officers know what exigent means. It's just it's emphasis. It's not necessary, and it could be struck by somebody in the review process. It was if it wasn't added by me, it was probably some component of the IACP model. I don't have that model policy there. I don't know if I added that as kind of an underscore. It's important to me as a supervisor that officers understand what exigency really is. And it's not just I want to do this, but there's an objective and reasonable belief that you need to do this, and here's why. So it's probably just important to me. That might be why I italicized it.
And then one more question.
Yes, sir.
The purpose and policy, or the purpose and scope, discusses that there's a right to record, but officers can also tell people to stand back a reasonable distance. It does not talk about, and I'm curious how it ended up, a lot of the policy ends up dealing with how to seize cameras that may have recorded evidence of a crime. how did that end up in this policy? Because it's like the two are different. One of them's a policy about recording, citizens recording police. The other one's about how to seize evidence of a crime. And is that information in another policy already?
Well, seizing evidence generally is, but this is, I guess, kind of a carved out nuance of seizing evidence. This would be evidence that, you know, is more frequently litigated than just taking an obvious piece of contraband and lodging it at the ECU facility. So we wanted to enumerate and, you know, pretty clearly specify what the proper procedure is. You know, I can envision that in subsequent drafts after the chief and some of the other senior leaders in the department have reviewed, that there would be almost a, you know, we're always recording. We always also get to author truthful and accurate police reports when we're done, and that it's possible that it could appear that, you know, unless there's a real, that's why we have the sergeants responding and kind of evaluating. Do we need to seize this piece of evidence? I mean, yes, it's captured evidence of a crime, this person interfering with the, you know, lawful arrest of another person, or the assault on a public safety officer, or harassment, or whatever. But is it instrumental to the case? Could we avoid the, you know, maybe some of the confrontation that could occur in the moment or after the fact? We don't make decisions to seize evidence based on the second and third order effects all the time, but I could envision that there would be some, you know, some kind of not cautionary, but just kind of a reminder to really review it. Is it really necessary? I mean, yes, it does. There is an evidentiary component of what's on that video, but is it ultimately material and necessary to the case? So it's in there because we don't want to have officers making missteps, and you could possibly, in a case like this, you know, make that misstep, or
so
avoid seizing evidence if you know that maybe isn't material.
Are the recordings that you're envisioning in this the ones of the person who stepped too close and ended up being arrested for interfering?
No, I mean, when I think about when I would tell an officer that video needs to be seized, I think about the person videotaping who's probably not doing anything other than being a witness, maybe, but we're away from the car and there's no camera occurring, or no video camera that's observing what's going on, but there's somebody who assaults the officer from behind or jumps on the back of the officer and you know, frees the person that they're trying to arrest. That's evidence, and if you know, I'll follow all the legal and lawful procedures to get it, but that's material to the case, and that's the kind of thing that I would envision seizing. It's not so much back up, no, I don't have to back up or you'll go to jail, and they don't back up. We don't need that camera in most instances. So it's more you know, witness.
Okay.
Okay, Claire, Tamara, and then Edward.
Thank you. So, yeah, I'm glad Jesse brought up that, this piece about the arrest based on restrictions, because I was reading too and saying, oh, well, this is now about seizing evidence that's on a mobile device or mobile recording device. So, and I understood you said we have policy just generally about seizing evidence, and I'm sure over the years there's been times where the media, you know, the news media had a recording that might show evidence of a crime, and the police would ask them to turn that over. But you're not worried about the media erasing those, right? Because they want to keep what they've filmed. Whereas I think there's a concern here that a citizen might capture a crime on their phone and then delete it. So my question is similar to Jesse's. Is this right now, in terms of this draft policy, if we were to adopt this, is this the only place that these procedures are appearing in EPD policy?
Is your question
in this detail?
Well, you've kind of stumped me.
Okay.
This is detailed because this is the area of the, I mean, the First Amendment component of this, and then there's the Fourth Amendment component of this.
Exactly.
So it's another area where, in order to get it right, I think you just have to devote a little bit more ink to it. I mean, we can
Yep.
say pretty clearly, you get to videotape us, and here are the few things you can't do. We can accomplish that with relatively little ink, but to say, when push comes to shove, when a situation gets to the point where there's an arrest or there's going to be a seizure of that digital media, I think we should devote a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm not critiquing it. I think it's good. That's why I'm asking. I think it's good for us to have this detailed policy on this new phenomenon in terms of potential evidence of a crime. So I think it's good. And so I'm just curious if it lives anywhere else.
This level of detail about other things that are low frequency, high liability, this level of detail exists in other areas of our policy manual.
Okay.
It may not be about seizing evidence, but it's about, what to do in a stalking order, what to do in these kind of mandatory situations, or situations where if we make a misstep, it's low frequency but high liability.
Yeah. So I mean, at this point, I don't have any objection to them living together in this policy. It does change the scope a little bit in terms of what we had all been talking about, but I think it's of great value. And as the police auditor pointed out, that also gives us a measuring stick by which to judge our officers handling these cases the way the community wants them to. So.
Okay. And we got Tamara, and then Edward, and Joe, and Jesse.
Well, thank you again for working on this policy. I do like the tone that it's written in, where primary and right up front it talks about the constitutional rights of the members of our community to film the police doing their duties. I think that quite a few of the commissioners at the table have already spoken about the rights on each side, and I think that it is important that that those rights are balanced. The rights of the officers to do their job safely and to protect members of the public that are either involved in the situation that might be nearby, and the rights of the community to record. It does occur to me, in this day and age with the technology available, it would be astounding to consider that somebody needed to be so close to record an event as to interfere with the police with the level of technology that's available today. Some of the people around the room recording are recording with a simple camera. With Zoom, that's probably something more than far beyond than what you could get just a couple of years ago. So I don't see, while I very much support the rights of the public to record police actions within the parameters that are listed here, I would think that the devices people are recording with today don't require them to be close enough to the officers as to be in a position where they'd be interfering with the situation. So I think while this is all detailed out, I think that's something that I think it's important to keep in mind when we're looking at this policy.
Thank you, Edward. And Joe.
Yeah, I'm going to suggest that we add a line, a word, or something to the purpose and scope, because every bit of our discussion about this so far has involved the safety of the recording public as well, and how when they insert themselves into an incident too closely, what have you, they can put themselves in harm's way. And I think that that's worth mentioning, that is, in so many words, part of the purpose of this policy. We've said it here, but I don't think we've actually put it down in so many words. It could be, officer and public safety right there in the first section. But I think that's important to remember, that that's a huge component of that safe distance, is have you put yourself in harm's way to record something which to you doesn't look dangerous? And the answer quite possibly is yes. We've talked about the almost impossibility of any two people agreeing on what a distance is out in the world. Is this tripod 15 feet from me, or is it 20 feet from me? I don't know. And in the heat of the moment, people are going to have really different ideas about that, and we need to be aware of that. When someone comes into a police action close enough for this policy to kick in, the officer is responsible for that person's safety now as well. They can't decide, well, it's on you, you got too close. It doesn't matter if you get hurt. That would really be letting everybody down, and that's not what they're out there to do. Lastly, I just have to say that from my own personal experience being shot at on the job, the safe distance to be looking at that is from behind 2 feet of concrete. Now, in the bad old days, that inevitably meant that there was all kinds of bystanders next to you with their heads up over whatever armor there was, because humans are curious. Now you've got your smartphone, so at least hold that up over the concrete. This sounds humorous, but seriously, there are people who, with every good intention, I think, would want to get in close and get a documentation. There's something going on here, it needs to be recorded in case something happens later. They're not looking at the whole picture either. They're looking at what's in their viewfinder. So they may miss the gun, the knife, the other bad person coming over to rescue their friend. So I just want us to remember this policy has to be as much about the public's safety doing something they have the right to do. So I'd like to see that wording in here.
Can that be captured, Matt? Or we need a motion for that, or we have unanimous consent here on that? They have that in public?
I'm good with it. Ask for
Okay,
consent.
I made
you had
the
that? Okay, thank you. All right, next I have Joe, and then James, and then
Yes.
Jessica.
Okay. Couple of things. In your policies section 415.2, I'd like to suggest that the two sentences be switched. That the important sentence is the second one, which is the officers are assuming that they are always being recorded. And I don't know that the phrase "in public spaces" is necessary.
Where are we talking about?
Under policy, which is 415.2. I'm just,
Please state that.
yeah, I would like to suggest that we reverse the two, there's two sentences, and that we put the second sentence first. Okay. And then also just pull out the "in public spaces" thing, because they can be recorded publicly and privately.
I object to that, because you're not allowed to record on private property. That's outlined in this policy as well. There's an
But if the per-
expectation
If
of
it's your
privacy.
property,
If it's your property,
Wait, 1 minute. I cannot speak at once here, and we're gonna do this the right way. Someone make a motion to make the change.
okay, I'll make the motion to make the change.
We have a second.
I'll second.
Seconded by Claire. Now discussion. Tamara?
So what this sentence says is members of the public, including media representatives, have an unambiguous First Amendment right to record officers in public places.
Yes.
That's the law. They don't have the right to record people in private places as outlined in section 415.4 under 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I don't agree with that change.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, Joe, you're next, and then
Okay.
Claire.
On that, if you have a person who lives in that or owns that space, okay, they get to record the police. Therefore, there's an application of recording in a private space. It exists.
But not on my property, not on my neighbor's property. On your property, yes,
Well,
but
but this is-
those are also private
All right,
private
hold on.
spaces.
Again, we're getting into debate.
Sorry.
I don't want to, Joe has the floor. When he's done, we move to the next
Okay.
person. You want me to put you back on?
415.4. Read the next part.
Okay. Okay, I'll back off on that, and we'll just swip. Okay.
What do you
No,
want to do, Joe? You
okay.
have the floor.
Okay, I don't think that phrase is necessary. There are cases where people who own their property, in other words, the issue is the officer's perspective, and officers should assume that they are being recorded at all times when on duty, both in public and private spaces. So I think that phrase is unnecessary, and the officer, in other words, if they assume that they're not going to be recorded in a private space, that's an error on their part.
Okay, next I have Claire, and then Bill, and then myself.
I don't have strong feelings about this one way or the other. As I think about it, I think, one, that section for 15.2 is talking broadly. Members of the public have the right to film. Officers should assume they're being filmed. I think the public space is saying when you've left the police station. In 415.4, it explicitly says, persons who are lawfully in public spaces or locations where they have the legal right to be present, such as their home, place of business, which are private, not public spaces, have a First Amendment right to record things that are in plain sight or hearing. So if the police are on Joe's property in his home, someone else in his home or himself could be recording those police. So I think that's what he's trying to say. But I don't necessarily think we need to change the language in 415.2. But I second it and have the discussion, so.
Okay, Bill?
I guess I would just, I don't agree with switching the two sentences. I don't think you start out a policy about the legal right to record the police activities by a community member by saying officers should assume they're being recorded. I think we have to say, I think the way that was presented is the right way to put it, that the policy is that the members of the public can record, and that's the policy. And that to help the officers understand that, the next sentence just says they should assume that. And so I don't think switching those makes a lot of sense.
Okay, I was next in the queue. Is anyone else to speak? Okay. I agree with what Bill just said, and what seems to be the sentiment of most of us, I think. And that is, it seems to be that the most important thing I'm hearing tonight is the right of the public and the media to record people. And that should be paramount. That should be the first thing we get into in a paragraph. And I think this is the proper order, obviously taken from, Lex Poll and other policies and written the same way. I think we need to leave it like it is, so I'm going to be opposed to the motion. Anybody else that wishes to speak? Not, I'll call for Joe. Okay.
Could you clarify the motion? I thought it was just the public space, but it's two parts?
Would you want to restate your motion, please, as the maker?
Yeah, there were two parts to it, which I would be happy to separate. One is to switch the second sentence to be the first, which, to switch, and then the second piece of it was to remove that phrase in public spaces.
Okay. We have the motion clarified to your satisfaction, sir. Okay, then we have, James?
Yeah, so I can get in on this one. That last statement, officers should assume that they are being recorded at all times when on duty in public spaces. I'm a bit torn with that because I don't see where that is even relevant to this policy other than a reminder that you would get a roll call. So I don't even see where that, because it's not a part of the policy. It's a reminder to the officer, and that's what they get when they're at roll call. You assume, everybody remember, you're being recorded. So I'm not quite sure how that would even fit in here because it's really not a part of the policy.
Okay, then we have Tamara and Joe on number 2 go around. Tamara.
Oh, I thought there was somebody before me. Okay. So again, if we take the word public out of the sentence, it reads, members of the public, including media representatives, have an unambiguous First Amendment right to record officers as long as their actions do not interfere with the officer's duties or the safety of officers or others.
That's not where
true.
he wants to take the public, he wants to take it out of the end of the second sentence.
The end of the second sentence? Again, I mean, I have less heartburn about it in the second sentence than I do in the first sentence. I thought you were talking about removing it in the first sentence, and I'm like, police do not have a right to, the members of the public do not have the right to record the police anywhere. So I misunderstood your motion, Joe, but I think this is a preamble to the meat of the policy, so I'm fine with it staying how it's written. Thanks.
All right, Joe?
Okay. My sense is that second sentence is the core of this entire policy. That's what it's about. Officers should assume that they are being recorded at all times when on duty, and just accept that as part of reality. Don't challenge it. Don't start a conversation about it. Don't divert your attention away from the thing that you're doing to have an argument with the person about whether they can record you or any of those other things. In other words, just accept it as part of the reality. And, there is the one caveat of, safe distance, protecting, the safety of bystanders and the police themselves, but beyond that, it's, the whole core is that officers should assume that they are going to be recorded.
Okay, everybody understand the motion? It's been clarified once. I'll ask for a vote. All those in favor of the motion, raise their hand. Okay, all opposed? Motion fails.
Okay.
Move on around the table, going back to the original
Excellent.
topic of questions around the table. If we can. Tamara?
Actually, I think I think I still have the floor after the motion.
Actually, you don't. But once the motion is voted on, your time is expired, so we're moving around the table. I'll get back to you, Joe, on the second go-round.
Okay.
I have a question about, am I next, sorry? Bob, is it me?
No, actually, James,
Oh,
you already
sorry.
spoke on it, though, so yeah, then you were next, okay.
Okay. I just have a question, and there's a little bit of language in here that's a little bit confusing to me about seizure of recording devices and how that sort of steps out. So the first sentence that I have a question about is the last sentence of section 415.5.2. That says nothing in this policy prohibits the seizure of a recording device if the crime captured is subsequently not deemed serious. I don't quite understand that sentence. I'm thinking, okay, so nothing in this policy prohibits the seizure of a recording device if the crime captured is subsequently deemed not serious. Well, the seizing comes before you would know if it's subsequently not deemed serious. So I don't quite understand the intent of that sentence.
Well, it's hard, I would love to answer it with an example, but one's kind of escaping me right now. But the sentence before it says, it's that kind of like that cautionary, advice, like, think long and hard, do we even really need this? And although, and they use the word serious crime, okay, so I think the sentence is there just to kind of underpin that we don't want to paint ourselves into the corner that only serious crimes, because a serious crime, depending on who you're talking to, can be different things. It's not a legal term or a term that's generally accepted in courts or police vernacular. So I think it's there just to underpin the idea that we may need that evidence because it's evidence of there may be some second and third order effect that the camera person isn't even aware of, that we want the evidence of that because it may capture a sex offender in the wrong location. There may be a case or some sort of investigation that might yield greater fruits down the line, even though in the moment the action that you're looking at is an open container or a resisting of arrest. So I think we're just trying to, the language by the policy writer is just trying to avoid painting themselves into a corner where somebody can't say, well, it wasn't serious, but you seized it anyway. Why, I guess.
I think I would just suggest looking at the sentence and seeing if it can be reworded for greater clarity, because I understand the idea you're trying to convey, but it doesn't, the sentence doesn't clearly state it that way. I don't feel like it states it that way. And then I had one other question about the last page, on the last page, 415.5.2E, and maybe I'm taking this out of context. E says in the first sentence, whenever a recording device or media is seized without a warrant or obtained by consent. So my question really is about the supervisor responsibilities underneath that. So in 415.5.3, so it says the supervisor will be summoned to respond to any scene where a person is to be arrested and the recording device will be seized. We talked about when would it be seized, and in the summary letter that you gave us, it seemed to imply that anytime a recording device is going to be seized, that a supervisor would be called to the scene, and maybe I misunderstood that. But I don't understand in E then, when you would be seizing it without a warrant obtained, without a warrant obtained by consent, it doesn't contemplate an arrest here. And so in that case, it sounds to me like a supervisor wouldn't be called to the scene. But I had understood that a supervisor would be called to the scene whenever a recording device is seized. Did I misunderstand that? Or am I taking this out of context?
No, I don't think you misunderstood it. I hope I understand your question right. It's that why, well, I guess, you know what, I probably don't understand your question entirely.
So I guess
try to
what I'm
restate it.
saying, what he says to me is that a recording device can be seized without a warrant or obtained by consent, and it's not necessarily contemplating in connection with an arrest, at least not in E. And that's why I'm saying maybe I'm taking it out of context. But when the supervisor responsibilities, it says they're being called to receive when a person is to be arrested and the recording device will be seized. I'm saying, it looks like there's, at least under E, some circumstances where a device might be seized without an arrest.
No, that shouldn't happen. I think there's language, or there should be language in there that says you won't seize it without an arrest. But after we've talked through a lot of these what-ifs and stuff like that, I think that's inappropriate, because as we discussed earlier, it's not necessarily the evidence of the person who's to be arrested. It might be evidence of another arrest. I mean, so frankly, after we've talked this out, there's a huge...
One, I'll yield the floor because there might be other commissioners who may have a different insight into that, so thank you. Thanks.
I think we've still got a couple people to speak on the first round, but that's all right. We're going to go to second round, and Jesse was first, then I have Joe, Edward, James, and Claire.
All right, I like where you're going with 15.5.2, the seizure, and the 5.3, the supervisor responsibilities, but I think you're figuring out what I'm going to suggest. It needs to be made more internally consistent. The first sentence does not go with the rest of it. It says, they're not going to be seized without consent or absent the arrest, and then much of the rest of it goes on to say how you're going to seize it without consent or absent arrest. So that'd be my suggestion on that. I'm going to make a motion that it's going to break out the first part of Joe's motion rather than flip the two. So I'm going to move to remove in a public space from the last sentence of 415.2.
I'll second it. I'll second it.
Seconded by Joe. Discussion on the motion.
Speak, Jesse.
Go.
Can I just ask Sergeant Lone, what was your intent behind making that, by saying in a public space there? I guess that's, I would like to maybe understand why you put that in there.
If I read it, it's sound guidance. You could strike in a public place and just say when you're on duty, and you would be saying the same thing that an officer should be hearing, is that you're in uniform, you're at work. I mean, it's good guidance for everybody, because I think there's just enough cameras and technology out there. But if you're asking my specific
Yeah, I'm just
intent,
trying,
or,
yeah,
I
just
don't
trying
have
to
an intent so
understand.
much as I do have an interpretation, and it's, I read that as just when you're on duty, you're being recorded.
So whether it says public space or not,
Is really
your intent
immaterial.
is anytime you have the uniform on or on duty. Okay.
George.
Or it could just say on duty in public as a possibility.
Well, we have the motion, so without amendment, and let's see, James.
To the motion, I think that, I'm all about making the policy as clear as possible. But I am fearful that we may be heading down a path where it's more personal than anything else, because some of the language, I mean, the way I see it, the first part, where we're talking about seizing without a warrant, someone could give a camera to the officer on the scene, and once the officer takes possession of that camera, does that constitute a seizure? Just by the mere possession of the transfer, accepting it, do you classify that as a seizure? If that's the case, because it's now in their possession, if that's the case, then I see why that would be in there. Some of the things where we are we're talking about are just obvious to the officer. The part, I'm going to remind you that you're being recorded at all times in the public spaces. These are really obvious to the officer, and I think that we're going in a place where we are. I wouldn't want anyone to. I work in a particular job. I know what to expect from that job. If someone has to put it down in writing, when you walk down the street, everybody has the right to look at you. We're going that way. I think we need to be very careful and stuff, because we're going to put something down here on paper and stuff that's really not worthy of this body's interpreted skills. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Gene. Anyone else on the motion? Okay, this one's pretty clear. The motion is to remove the words "in a public space" and leave the ending "on duty." Going to call for the vote. All in favor of the motion, raise your hand. All opposed? The ayes have it, and the motion passes. Going back to questioning again, I have Joe on the second round, Edward, James, and Claire.
Okay. Comment was made earlier about people and recording technology not, wanting or needing to move close. I think that we have to consider now cameras like these that have wonderful zoom lenses, that's probably true, distance is fine. But there are cases where phones do not have zoom lenses, so there will be a tendency on the part of people to try to move more closer in order to get better footage. And also there is the issue of audio pickup. So that is a motivation that the person doing the recording will have, and that's a reality in this particular situation. But the main thing that I wanted to get to is down in this 415.5.2, the end of it. Again, when the device has been, the recording device has been seized, we have two aspects. Number one is the concept of a fishing trip. In other words, now that we've got their phone, we can go looking for whatever we want. I don't think it's good to leave the public with the impression that that might be a behavior. And so they'll get you for whatever else you got recorded on there. And people leave their selfies on there and probably some things that they would rather not have, having copies made by the police. The second thing is the question of punishment, in the sense that during the discussion that I had concerning the three cases that came up during November, there did seem to be on the behalf of the people involved the sense that they were being punished for having recorded these situations. So seizure of the camera does constitute a punishment. In other words, you lose the use of your camera, and for many people that's their entire telephone directory. That's a lot of other things that are part of their lives at this point, and that's removed from them. And they also, of course, have to go through a procedure to get it back, which does consume their time, possibly a cost, and considerable effort. So it does represent a punishment. So I am a little bit sensitive in this particular area to those two concerns, and I'm wondering if some kind of language could be worked out to say, look, we just don't do that kind of stuff. My 2 cents there.
Thank you, Joe. Edward, and then James, and then Claire.
I've got some easy ones. They're just grammar and outlines. On page 2, we've got a section B that goes 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we've got another 1, 2, 3, 4 also under that section B. It's going to be a little confusing, and I would suggest putting a C there in front of that additionally.
Good point.
The new C1, I'm not sure what this sentence means. Anywhere private property, the recording party would be trespassing upon. I think what they're trying to say is any private property upon which the recording party would be trespassing. Does Sarah.
That sounds right.
Just checking.
English major.
You could tell. And on the next page, under B, I think that's ask the reporting party in possession of the recording device? Ask the recording party.
Yes.
That's all. This one's fine. Thought we were
Those
going to
were
catch these
softballs.
now and not later. I'm done.
Thank you, James.
I'll pass.
So, you're okay, Claire?
So I was just in the discussion with Tamara and the sergeant about that section E, the 415.5.2. I think section E was actually addressing part of what Joe was raising. I think the purpose of that section is strictly to say, if you take a hold of this item under these conditions, you must try to get it back as quickly as possible. So it wasn't trying to articulate different scenarios in which it might be seized, but emphasizing the need to return the device as in a timely fashion, or earliest possible time, it says. So just wanted to offer that clarification that that's the purpose for section E. It's not saying it could be this situation, that situation, or this situation. So I don't think it contradicts anything before it. And then I don't have a motion around this, but I was just contemplating, I appreciated your note about the policy title and clarifying that you're not talking about in-car video or body cams. But considering the conversation, and I appreciated Ed's suggestion that we emphasize safety, that a large purpose of this policy is to make sure folks are safe while they're engaging both in their jobs as a police officer and their constitutional rights as a citizen. So I'm not offering this as a motion, but I'm just making a suggestion that because I'm not offering it as a motion because I don't think it's the greatest title in the world, but one potential different title might be Safe Interactions with Citizens Recording Police. So it kind of articulates the policy. That's a great ringtone.
Kind of shoot me out of there.
And I don't know, we've got the second section about seizing recording devices, and I didn't come up with any language to include that in the title, so that's just my little offering.
Thank you for clarifying that. Okay, when I was next and then Tamara, but we're running a little bit late here. I just want to say quickly, there is one aspect of this that we can do nothing about, and that's the technology today allows recordings to go directly to the cloud or to another website and wouldn't be stored on the phone anymore. In fact, the ACLU's developed an app for that. They have an app for that, so it can go directly to their files, and it's not on the phone. So it really, those are issues that people that are savvy enough to understand technology today will be able to do that and not have to worry about seizure. And I hope those people that are most important to understand that. Tamara, you had one more thing?
Yeah, I just have two quick things. So in the title, would it be more appropriately worded recording of police activities by the community? Just a suggestion. And then I guess just to summarize the point I was trying to make earlier, and I apologize if I did it a bit awkwardly, is the real question I have is, when a device is seized, whether it's under exigent circumstances, whether they think the officer thinks there's commission of a crime on it, if a device is seized, is a supervisor being called to respond to the scene? I don't care whether they are or they aren't. I'm just trying to get clarification around whether there's an arrest or an impending arrest or not if a device is seized under whatever circumstances as a supervisor called to the scene. If they are, I just think that needs to be clarified. If they're not, then that wasn't clear to me. That's all.
My intent would be if I ran the world, Sergeant would show up on each one of those kind of low frequency, high liability events and just evaluate with the officer what's going on. If that wasn't clear, I apologize. That one section is my own writing because
I'm just thinking that it's a good
feel
part to
strongly about
include. I just think if that's the case, it needs to be stated a little more clearly.
Sure, okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so at this point, we know that we have some changes to be made to the policy, and I'll ask it to be brought back at the April meeting.
Yes, sir.
And if we can go ahead and go ahead and discuss it and possibly have a motion to vote it up and down. And so we're moving on to the next item on the agenda now. That's the
Thank you, Sergeant.
intergovernmental.
Thank you.
Intergovernmental agreement. And this was pursuant to a question that Commissioner Warkey asked at the last meeting. It seemed to get some concern from other commissioners as well as to whether or not we, how the intergovernmental agreement allowed police to communicate with the University of Oregon on arrest made of their students and notifying them of misconduct or arrest made off campus. So I think, Chief Kearns, did you have a response to that question, or?
Took a little digging for us to figure out what's happening. And I can tell you a little bit about it if you like.
Yeah, just if you would answer that one.
We have a community service officer that works at the West University Public Safety Station, and one of their jobs is to gather the data to understand what occurred over the weekend with regard to loud and disorderly parties. And so they report to an office at the University of Oregon, the neighborhood liaison, I think. That's not the name of the office, but that's their purpose. They give the numbers of arrests of students that happen related to parties. And then if the neighborhood liaison asks for the names, we provide the names. And they're public record. Anybody who asks who was arrested over the weekend, we get names too. What they do with them after that is not our business.
Is that, can I ask a question?
That's your question? Yeah, well, obviously, if you got another part to it, yeah, go ahead.
Is there any agreement between the UOPD, or UO and EPD about that? It's just kind of the way it's working now?
I think it's a practice, and we've been trying to reduce the number of loud and disorderly parties that are disturbing to the neighborhoods and the near neighborhoods around campus. And so probably an entire, system of practices has evolved, and you've asked about one of those. And what's occurred in the last few years is that the university has agreed to extend the student conduct code to conduct that occurs off campus, to new conduct that occurs off campus that wasn't previously governed by that. And that includes these types of citations. So they want to know which of their students are engaging in that criminal conduct. And I'm glad they do, because when students are held accountable in both arenas, they are less likely to recidivate.
Thanks.
Okay. Yeah. Bill, do you have something on
Yeah,
the
can I
subject?
just ask one last question, and not to put you on the spot, Chief? But do they get, let me see if I can ask this right. So, do they have to go through the normal process when they ask for that citation? To get whose name that anybody else would have to go through? Or are they just given it by this representative from that station, from that office?
The CSO provides the names.
Okay.
And it's an inter-institutional practice that we've set up.
Tamara, you have a question?
Couldn't they pick that up from the log that's posted on EPD's website of police activity?
Yeah, I don't know if they can get the names. Could be that they can, I just don't know.
I think when that first came out, it had names in it. I think they've been redacted since then. Okay, thanks.
Okay, does that answer your question, Jesse?
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to take a break now and come back at 7:05.
7:05.
5-minute break. So.
5-minute break.
Okay?
Taskmaster.
If you need more, we'll excuse you. Reminder, the camera's on.
Right there.
Always on.
You should always.
That's always a challenge.
Always assume you're recording.
And let's be careful out there.
Can I
Go ahead.
take them?
No, I gotta.
Gotta run
I
it back.
gotta-
Gotta run. Already now?
Need these, David?
No, I got it. You guys want water? Oh, it's fine. No. Sorry, no, I'm sorry. I just had a pressing question. I know, but I agree. No, I get it. I do this all the time at other meetings.
Diabetes.
Could be considered an issue. I agree. We need to be very careful. But, and you know me, I'm always on,
But I do think that it would be good to do a little clarification.
Yeah, more.
Snacks? Come on now.
They can make a copy.
And it's helpful, so I'm proud of that. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Have a good night.
It's not. And so they were
as
kind
it
of process,
stands,
make
I
sure the
think,
county
and Jeremy,
commission.
when you and I met about the agenda,
Okay.
I think we're marching on.
I'm on vacation. Now,
Cool, so you have good news for me.
Well, you there's no way they could walk in.
And I think we need to be
Well, there was a, I had 2 insurers on our phone. And Chinese is in that. And the joint relationships, we went back and forth. I did somebody just told me it's worse than me when I burgled my house.
If we had 10 more things at the work plan, if we had 10 more things on the work
The
plan,
thing is that
I'd say,
the process is
10 things specifically for we talked to city council 2 years ago. You're not in that position. You don't have to.
we are the structural. Now that has advantages.
They always have their possession.
I know, I just like.
Yeah. So if, I know, but you also never have to take control of members' rights and stuff.
Okay, so the thing is,
How many months do I look at every month that's coming out? You said when we go, 9 more meetings. Now I'm kind of like, I only have a few meetings. No, now I am pretty sure. It's good, I am gonna be sad.
This is
Yeah, but there was a period of time where I told Jim. He's like, are you sure? And I said,
Pretty big deal.
this is not what I. And I'm not saying people shouldn't bring up different perspectives or make sure that they don't see it. So I think that's what you should do. I think it's important to have perspectives from one end to the other. Otherwise, we don't have a good discussion. Otherwise, you're not talking about things in a way. You're not reflective of the community. Everybody agrees on everything all the time. You're not debating the points that are I do believe that. Yes, I do believe that. I do believe that. But there's a way to bring up points that are not hot points that disagree with people in a way that needs to be points that we can talk to our group that we have now is respectful no matter what they're doing or what they're bringing up. They don't land past them. They agree with them. They don't think we're all wrong because you all got it wrong. You know, I think we have, and we've been able to get work done. Because of yeah, so I will be
Right now, on the wall, yeah, and so I've got it in my office. I already had the
Here, I think I have one of these cards.
That I would lose these feelings as well as hurting you.
Did you see?
Very different. Yeah, that's my first decision.
Did you see?
A lot of it they can just be from your spinal cord. But okay, when my feet turn pink and hot, bluish meaning
you need to ask Paul. I know. I gotta run my phone out.
too much,
Now, wait a minute.
That's next. Then corrections.
Yeah, that's
One
right.
thing at a
There you go. That's the way to do it. I'd like to call the commission back to order, please. Everybody take their seat. We can finish up and get you home. While it's still daylight? No, I'm afraid not.
Almost, soon enough.
Almost.
Love when these days get longer.
Just not having to drive over here. Feels like a starting the evening shift.
Moving along.
Gotta come to work.
We have the chief's presentation.
Well, pretty easy to tell what all those folks were here for. Little did they know, we're still got CCTV.
I know.
We still have another good topic to
Stay.
No.
Do a front page story about that.
I have a question.
That's why I got free election next year.
It worked.
Can't see.
26.
Yes, that's essentially, yeah.
Give me one of those. It's pretty good.
Huh?
We should chat.
Oh, okay. You gonna run against me?
No, but Pete and Chris Wig already have me working.
No, what
So
I,
before all my time is taken.
what I've
Oh,
done
I
here
see.
is
Hopefully I
to,
won't have a, I'm not running against me.
what I've done here is to, because you all have the report in your pack, I thought we would expedite things and move along. We had a big agenda tonight, and I knew we were going to be crowded, so the chief will answer any questions you might have regarding any issues in the pack or questions about what he put in his report. Thank you. Anything you want to highlight there, chief, or just take questions?
I'll talk, and you're all welcome to interrupt me to ask what you really want to know about.
Okay.
I go to I go to neighborhood association meetings, mostly when I'm invited, because there's so many. And River Road, Santa Clara has a group that's been considering annexation for some time. They're just studying what it means to annex. And so River Road had a few questions about what alternatives might be to providing policing services out there. So that's why I brought that.
Can I comment on that?
Question? Sure.
So I wasn't able to attend that because I think it conflicts with the city council meeting, but I did see some notes from the meeting, and I know they're concerned about patrol. And if I had been able to attend the meeting, I would have told them that at least during the night, there's a very capable EPD officer who's assigned to patrol River Road in particular, but she often gets pulled off to deal with other issues in other parts of the city because really there's not that much going on.
On city lots.
But not,
So what's that?
On lots with city tax.
Sure, but she drives around the streets. I don't think she says, this is a county road, I'm not going to patrol it. So did they give you the impression that they felt like they were underserved? And were you able to provide them with any data
Well,
about that?
I think they're familiar, that they know that we patrol out there.
Okay.
And so there was never any doubt about that. But they also know that if they're a county resident, and they live in River Road, for most crimes, they won't get a police response.
Okay.
I can personally respond to that because my sister-in-law, who was a realtor in town, had a break-in at her house one morning after her husband left for work. And they live off one lane, off River Road, but they had to call the sheriff's department because they live in
Because they're county,
And
yeah.
there was no deputy to send, period.
Wow.
I mean, there was nothing. I mean, and this person, she was terrified, obviously, and the person came into her bedroom and she screamed and the guy ran out. I think he thought that when the husband left that he was, you know, it was clear, the house was clear, and he didn't realize she was at home. It scared him probably as much. He ran out of the house and took off. But, you know, the sanctity of your home and being helpless and being in a room like that, just, it was unfathomable to me. I just couldn't, you know, whenever we lived in a location, we called the police, they come, you know, it just, they didn't have anybody to send. So,
Yeah, during certain hours, someone calls calls the police, and it's in the county, and this can be River Road or Santa Clara, and a police deputy should respond. They wake them up at home, the deputy, and they get dressed, and then they go to the call. So there are hours when there is no patrol in the county. So if the OSP isn't available, and now if it's an emergency where a person's life is at stake, then Springfield Police responds, east of Springfield, and Eugene Police respond, west of Eugene.
So an intruder in your bedroom isn't considered an emergency?
Well, we don't know.
I don't know.
We don't know the details.
No, I understand.
We know third-hand account.
That'd be an emergency in my book.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And we don't know if EPD responded to that.
Yeah, they did in this case, but.
Third party.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you for that, for bringing that up, though, because that's something that troubled me ever since it happened years ago, but still.
and then I'm on the OACP's, Oregon Association of Chiefs of Police Legislative Committee, and we have conversations about the bills that are being considered. And what else?
Dr. Seuss?
Yeah. Celebrated Dr. Seuss' birthday. We have a lot of applicants for police officers. It's kind of a tough way to go about the hiring process. We have two application processes back to back. One is at the end of the calendar year, one at the beginning of this calendar year. I think it's an intense workload, but we're getting a heck of a lot more applicants. And we have, I think, 14 that are going to background right now. We have 16 vacancies, so I don't think we're going to have any problem filling them. Let's see. The rest is the kind of stuff we've seen before. We started including bicycle theft in the crime data that you see, because it's gone up quite a bit, 67% so far year-to-date over last year.
Any particular legislation OACP is interested in?
You know, OACP, I don't think is introducing anything. It's just sort of monitoring and giving its position on certain things. Nobody's really, OACP isn't really trying to touch any of the marijuana rulemaking that's going on because there's a whole swirl of activity happening there. I say OLCC, OACP. OLCC, on the other hand, is spending a great deal of time on that. And they've called and asked police chiefs' opinions about certain things. We're all waiting to see how that turns out. Otherwise, you know, I shouldn't be doing this without the notes in front of me, but the kind of typical things that come along, sentencing guidelines for DUI drivers, for example, that sort of thing.
Yeah, there's a lot, there's bills related to that right now.
Yeah, you've probably seen it.
Yeah.
On that. Edward, you have a question?
Yeah, Chief, I'm looking at this area of concern map. And if I'm reading this right, these are what in some cities would be called hot prowls, burglaries of occupied residences is what I'm seeing here?
Yes.
A lot of them? So these are bold people.
Yes.
Yeah, and a high risk factor for the residents.
Yeah, this is a thing that happens in the West University neighborhood. We don't see it in other parts of town very much.
Well, there's a density of people who are not yet thinking about their own security or replacing the things that mommy bought them. I generalize.
Yeah, there are a lot of, and there are old apartments and old houses that
bad
don't have the same security. Just the lifestyle of college students. A lot of people, a lot of friends walking in and out of apartments, and there are moments when nobody's there. So they're just easy places to prey on.
This is the kind of pattern you see around some housing projects in some cities where there are people who just make it their business to notice when the neighbors are all gone from a place and just harvest them over and over and over.
Yeah, it's a tough area for us to manage.
No, it's good that you're concentrating on it. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, moving on to the next
Well,
item.
one thing I'd share with you, and we'll get the link to you, is that President Obama's task force on 21st century policing, the interim report is out. It's basically the first draft. 6 pillars of 21st century policing. It's very interesting, and I'm working my way through it. And I would encourage all of you to look at it. It's a lot of reading. But Jeremy can send the link. I'll make sure he has it.
Thank you. Very good. Okay, moving on to the next item, which is the CC proposal. I'll make a motion to remove it from the table for discussion. Have a second?
Second.
Second. And any discussion? Okay, all in favor of removing it from the table for discussion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Ask Chief Durr, Assistant Chief Durr, to join us at the table, please. We have the original proposal, and now we have a draft policy. It was included in your packet last week. I hope everyone has to review it. Talks about implementation training too. We have a letter here from Lieutenant Reynolds regarding implementation training. I think that's coming up next, though, right? Yeah, that's okay. Right now, we're dealing with the policy. So, questions of Assistant Chief Durr on the policy? Or
Did you want me?
Would you like to go ahead and make a presentation while you're at it?
Yeah, I can run through some of the
right.
changes that were brought forward to me and that we made into the next draft. I think one of the first ones on page 1 was there was a discussion around displacing crime, and we reframed that to diminish crime. So thank you for that input. And going on to page 2. I think under the section of analysis of crime, we had a discussion of, there was like, I think Councilor Surratt brought up the awkwardness of the pedestrian activity, and I think it was around the second paragraph from the bottom, where it says, the old one said the reason behavior-based crime. So we rephrase that, and I think trying to capture, I think, the awkwardness that you pointed out, and then what our intent was, so we flush that out a little bit. And that was really the changes on the project page. And then moving into the draft policy, I think one of the first things, my incomplete thought that I had about talking about the unmanned stationary and talking about the camera placement, so that was removed out of there. And then we also removed any of the acronyms. Somebody pointed out that we had too many acronyms without them being spelled out, so that was those were corrected. And then under 606 3.1 under the monitoring system. The intent of this section was just talking about the monitoring of the cameras. And I know we had discussion in the last paragraph of that section. It says the recorded video, and I know there was some discussion about putting live video in there, but this intent was that this video was already recorded and that you're going back over the DVR to look at it. And then later on in that same sentence, there was a discussion about defining city employees and why that was in there. And the intent of this was, let's say we had an event that occurred downtown and maybe it involved one of our employees with the PD, and maybe the city attorney needed to review it, or somebody in risk needed to review it. If that wasn't in there, then these other city employees couldn't do it. So that's what the intent was, not that just any city employee could do it. And so to add that into there, we put in the authorization of the chief. So the chief would be authorizing anybody else. And then the second part of that sentence, because it's kind of a separate thought, again, thinking that another law enforcement agency would have some type of need to view this recorded event, not to get a copy of it at this time, but to review it for whatever criminal investigation purposes, the watch commander could then authorize that. And then so any obtaining that video would then fall under the section of obtaining recorded evidence later on into the policy. So I hope that explains it. So I tried to flush that out within the policy. That was basically those changes that we made forward after our last presentation.
Thank you very much. And so questions for Mr. Chief Durr or any discussions at this point? I'll start with you. Jesse?
Could you say that again about the transmitted to monitors, or what you're actually envisioning under 60631?
So, like our what that is, the intent there is that if there's a live event, then somebody in the comm center, one of the dispatchers, could be able to pull that camera up, so that when the responding officer is going there, then the dispatcher could accurately relay information that's happening right then and there. So it's not that these cameras would be monitored all the time, but it would allow our dispatchers or somebody that has a need to view it live so that they could give that information to responding officers so the scene is safe, so we get real-time information. Because it would be a shame not to have that capability if the cameras were there.
So what was the part you said about pulling the DVR and watching it later?
That was the next paragraph when it says the recorded video from cameras may be assessed. So again, I know we had a discussion of live and stuff like that, so I think we put it recorded in there to make it kind of what that looks.
And then one other question, like what we discussed was a limited scope test period with a couple of cameras. Is there any reason that this policy can't say that? Like this sounds very permanent. The city of Eugene places cameras strategically throughout the city.
The policy is meant to be long-lasting, not just on a pilot project. So that's why the pilot project kind of defines that. So it's an 18-month pilot project where we monitor it and then we come back. And at the end of the life of the pilot project, if it was no longer deemed valuable, then we would also wipe out the policy and say, we're no longer going to do this, therefore we no longer need the policy.
But I would guess that things will be learned if the pilot project gets to go, that things will be learned during the pilot that will inform what the policy should be. So shouldn't this remain a draft policy during there should be a policy that guides the pilot project, but doesn't necessarily purport to be the policy that's going to be in place after 18 months.
Well, I hear what you're saying, but I think if you don't have a full policy out there, then you don't really have a policy. You have something that's sitting in the background. So what would, after all the revisions and stuff, you put the policy out there, it's guiding by this pilot project document. And then I think we come back and we make revisions as we go along. This probably is not going to be perfect. The pilot project's not going to be perfect, but we come back and we can revise policy as needed. And we do that all the time. So
if I could respond to these questions.
Sure.
And if it would, we've never done this before, but I'm totally willing to call this public safety camera system pilot And then whatever dates we have for beginning and ending the pilot project, we could include somewhere in the policy that says this policy goes into effect on this date, and the policy will no longer be part of our, the closing date of the pilot. I would be completely comfortable with that.
Does that satisfy your interest?
Yeah, but that's only my comment. I don't want to make a motion on that
Well,
right
then,
now.
if the administration's willing to do it, we don't need it. Okay. And I have a queue started, so I have Joe, myself, Tamara, Claire, and James.
Yeah, my concerns are sort of more technical, in the sense of the amount of storage necessary to maintain this system and the amount of bandwidth necessary to transmit signals from one location to another. Have you folks gone through any numbers? In other words, you expect certain resolution of the images, certain frame rate, certain compression, as to how much storage and how you're going to access that kind of stuff?
But that's what we'd be going for. If this was approved, we'd be looking out for an RFI to have the experts tell us what the capabilities are, because, if this is a year down the road or 6 months, technology changes, and so we have to look at what the capabilities are depending on what the subject matter experts tell us, and then we'd have to, with the dollars that we have to spend in that, try to figure out what the best system is for that. So
Okay.
I'm not that technically gifted, so I would expect the vendors to be able to tell us those things.
Yeah, I think that's an area that maybe you should start looking at, fairly early in this process, because the numbers add up real fast, which is certainly our experience at the community television station, on a limited budget, trying to archive tons and tons of video. So I think you have the same set of difficulties that we would have. And probably worse, because you're looking to do continuous recording.
Yep, that's definitely one of those things we'll take into consideration.
Okay, good.
Thank you. I was next, and then Tamara, and then Claire, and then James. So I have given this a lot of thought since this was brought up, and I'm amazed at how, those of you who remember, and were here long enough to remember that downtown mall that we had with the fountain that never worked, I don't think. Maybe it did work, but I don't remember it ever working. Anyway, we've come a long way, and the town is beginning to look vibrant again. I see businesses, I see people out walking around, I see, it's just changed completely, and it looks like we're headed in a good direction. I'm interested in the morphing of the downtown population now. I think we're referring to some newer people coming in as travelers because they're passing through, I think. But there have been more and more reports from what I'm reading about people being more and more intimidated. There seems to be a more aggressive crowd of people that are coming through there that are intimidating people in the downtown area. And we do see that uptick with the reports in the paper and other issues that we see out there, come more crime. And we've watched the chief's reports and we found them in here as well. So I'm concerned that, we got to do things differently. We got to take a look at what are the tools we can use to do this. And I was really moved this morning, and I know this is anecdotal, but I like to use anecdotes because it's emblematic of what can happen. In Lincoln County, Washington, outside of Spokane, little small community, 18-month-old child was abducted by a stranger. Just came up and took the child, and children were chasing, and they had video of this whole incident. They were able to capture this guy and arrest him and match him up with the video. I mean, I would like to think that these things that are available to us to help keep our community safer aren't such a terrible infringement on other people. We want to capture the bad guys and not worry about other people going about their business and doing their daily shopping and whatever they're doing downtown. So I very much am in favor of trying this out. And I think the idea of worrying about, how we're going to get this right, and that's all in the project, that's all in the pilot project. But I think we need a sense of the commission that it's okay to try things differently, to go ahead and look look at the possibilities that are out there so we can, if it doesn't work out, we can, we can always say, look, this didn't seem like it was something we want to do here, and then we can make that recommendation. So I'm very much in favor of this. That's my piece. Thank you. Tamara, you were next.
So I don't have a strong feeling one way or the other whether the word pilot's in the project, in the policy or not. Back when the taser was piloted in the police department, we had a policy that supported that. I don't believe it included the word pilot in the policy. It may have, I don't recall that it did. And of course, those policies are looked at ongoing and certainly at the end of a pilot project to see if they need to be updated, changed, or permanently put in place. So I don't have a problem with that. I did have a couple of things. One is that at the same city council meeting that I went to see the appointment of our new commissioner, the city council was discussing public safety downtown before it got to our agenda item, and Councilor Clark, who I'll channel since he's not here today, he mentioned that he would not take his children downtown at night. And like I mentioned in a previous police commission meeting, I've had occasion to be down in that area where we're talking about doing the pilot project quite a bit because we frequent the businesses down there. And I agree with Councilor Clark. It's not somewhere I would take my child at night. I don't know if these cameras are going to make a difference or not, but I do think it's worth piloting to see what effect they may have on crime. So it's not anything that seems that onerous to do a pilot project of. The other thing is that I was in a meeting this week with the president of Dave, was it Hauser? The president of the Chamber of Commerce. And he was talking about a private network of cameras that they have in the same area of business owners. And I was talking to him about the pilot project and the CCTV policy, and he said, well, it'd be really great if the police looked at where we already have private cameras when they decide where to locate whatever number they have and wherever they decide to put them, if they looked at the network of private cameras that are already there to see it, if, where they may have more value. And I don't know how the police department has had occasion to ask for any of that private video, but they're certainly excited that the police are, the business owners down there are certainly excited that the police department's looking at this in their area. They've sort of gone out and done it on their own. And in fact, Dave Hauser mentioned the fact that, 5 years ago, we wouldn't have been able to have that many cameras downtown, but the price of the cameras and the technology has advanced to such a pace that I think he said there were 28 private cameras in this general area. I don't know if they're all right in this exact zone, but so I do think that it certainly sounds like it's affordable if those business owners can afford the cameras. I'm sure the police department can find the funds to put a few cameras in. Thanks.
Okay, I have Claire, James, George, and Edward.
Yeah, I do not support this project and don't think it's necessarily the best use of our limited public safety dollars, but I will save that argument for another time. I appreciate what Jesse asked for, and I appreciate the chief being willing to articulate that this is a pilot and a pilot policy in addition to a pilot program. For me, I think that would be an important caveat. I think the difference with the tasers was I don't think there was really a big question as to whether or not we were going to eventually arm officers with tasers. It was really how are we going to work it out until we got to that point. Whereas while I can see I'm in the minority on this, I think there's still a question as to whether or not this is going to yield the results that we're hoping to. And so it's, in my view, much more of a pilot than the taser piece was.
James?
Okay. A lot of great discussion and back and forth on this subject. I've always been a firm believer is that we must define change. If not, the change will define us. And if we are fearful of trying to do something different to increase safety for the public, and I will give you an example like Josephine County, who the taxpayers decided that they didn't want to pay taxes, so they no longer have a police department, they no longer have sheriffs, and they no longer have a lot of other stuff. What they do have are people that are call themselves neighborhood watch that are walking around armed. We just heard a little bit about Santa Clara, some of the incidents that they're having out there. I think that this would be a great project to find out if we can, when we don't have the largest manpower or manpower shortages, in this case we're down 16 police officers, this would certainly take up some of that slack in some of those areas. And also the idea of having a camera that can transverse and be able to move around to give real-time feedback to officers responding to an incident, a high-value incident where lives could be taken, I think is a great time to try it. We're talking about a trial. As a researcher, I believe in trials. You know, you don't know until you've actually had it done. So I will be supporting this, and I will have to also ask the chief if he would please not take my thunder anymore, because I was going to suggest that same title that you did, and I didn't look around, and I guess I didn't have any notes or anything like that, but he's visionary. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ed, George, and then Edward.
By the way, I'm very much supportive of this. Actually, had an incident at 3:15 a.m. Sunday morning. My doorbell rang, and I was able to look. I have videos at my shops and my businesses, but go back and I saw two young girls running up from the east, running, spurring each other on, ringing the doorbell, and then they ran up the hill. So I know it wasn't a car, and you know, my wife was scared, but after seeing that, it was like, yeah, these kids are just having fun out there. I think I've never did anything that bad. One of the concerns is I did talk to the bartender at Davis's. I had dinner there last night, and they have a lot of video down there, and one of his concerns, his frustrations, was that they have video of people doing things illegally, drinking, doing drugs, and the video doesn't do much deterrent, because then again, we don't prosecute any of those things. So that is a very, very, I mean, there's like a big black hole on the other side. You can prove it and you can do it, but if they're not going to be prosecuted or punished, then there's going to be little behavior modification. So that is a concern of mine. But for, I don't know where the bigger crimes happen. I'm very, very, very supportive of it for that reason of being able to prosecute. And as somebody mentioned, the kid up in Washington who they got that guy for doing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Edward?
I think it's important to remember that there are different purposes being talked about for these cameras. There's the idea that bad guys will see the camera and go somewhere else, which may or may not be supported by statistics or facts. There's the idea that the camera is mostly there to be a witness, so that after something occurs, you can help identify it. And we also heard the idea here that that camera is watching the officers' backs in real time in some instances. I think it's really important to remember that those are really three completely different purposes, especially in the mind of the public. I don't have a lot more to say on that, except that we're sort of mushing this all together, and it's going to be really easy, I think, for concerned people to look at one possible use of that and decide to throw out the other two because they object to one of them. So we might want to take some care to identifying the modules of this a little more discreetly in that way, so that if it turns out that there's a tremendous public pushback, or 3/4 of the council thinks it's a horrible idea to do one of these three things with these cameras, we haven't lost the whole notion. Just a thought. It seems to me that if there's already a downtown network of cameras that are primarily used to look at after the fact, that belong to private businesses, it might be more palatable to the public in a pilot program to know that these police cameras are filling in gaps in something that's already there, as opposed to that it's brand new. And then there's people's just plain fear of this, that if there's a camera, there's going to be facial recognition software. And EPD is going to be tracking everybody that walks by. And I've had citizens say this to me. He says, how can you be a part of that? Like, not. That's not happening. But it could. And they're right. You're not always going to be chief. The political situation may change. The technology's there. I see their point. So what we do with this has to address those possibilities, not just what we intend to do with this technology, but how other people might make use of it further down the road. And I think the incident in Sprague, Washington really illustrates the tremendous value of these things after the fact. Witnesses identified that baby snatcher as a 30-year-old man who, because the town was 500 people and nobody recognized him, he must be somebody traveling through. So literally, the police chief, he said, we're leaning on everybody who's passing through town. We're leaning on every newcomer. It turned out to be a 15-year-old who lived in the town, who was identified from a photograph from a camera on the outside of a private business. So if it had not been for that camera on a private business giving access to their imagery to the police would still be looking for a 30-year-old guy from out of town. So that's incredibly valuable. That may have stopped that guy from going and doing the same thing the next day to somebody else's baby. So let's remember, that's a really, how can the public argue with that we were able to identify this person and stop them because of that video? That seems unassailable. It's these other possibilities or other uses that I think that people are alarmed about. The live monitoring, they don't see any value to that, and the possibilities for abuse. So I don't have a place that I'm going with this. I'm not making a motion about it. I just want to lay out some of the things that I hear on this topic and what I think the values are.
Anybody that hasn't spoken yet? Not, we'll go a second round. Okay, Jesse and then Tim.
Early on, I brought up that I would hope the policy would not allow facial recognition software, license plate reading software. That hasn't made it into. Thanks for bringing that up again. I was sorry for not bringing it up next month and to bring it up now. But all it is a matter of what software you're using to look at the camera, or to look at what the camera is looking at. And you can be tracking people, license plates. And if we're going to be doing that, it seems like there needs to be a policy about how it's going to happen, and this would be the policy where it should be at. That's all I've got on that.
Okay, they have Tamara and then James.
Does the police department have facial recognition software?
No.
Well, that's not a concern for me then. And I think the other thing is that I think if members of the public were aware that so many private businesses downtown had cameras already, it may have already served as a deterrent. I just don't think that people are aware of them. I certainly was surprised to hear there were that many and that they had sort of grouped together, as a business community to try to take care of these things themselves. And I also don't have any concern if the use of the live feed is used in limited circumstances, when there's a crime occurring in progress downtown. I always think of situations that occurred, like the shootings in France, the Charlie Hebdo shootings, and yes, we saw the cell phone video after the fact, but the police didn't have the benefit of seeing that video while the crime was occurring or after that, which may have ended up differently in some of the events that occurred after the fact and things like that. So, as long as it's narrowly drawn for the live feed in certain circumstances, I know it says watch commander, or watch commander already has to give that. I don't think it would hurt to, if the public has concern about that, I don't think it would hurt to draw that a little more narrowly and when you can look at the live feed. Just something to think about. Thanks.
Okay, I have James, the chief, myself, and then Joe.
Okay, well, I agree with a lot of what practically everything that's been said at the table about the concerns. I think the concerns are legitimate and stuff. But I also think that we're putting a end before it even gets started. We're throwing up ideas that should be captured, but we're already to the point where we're thinking that this is a bad idea, and it hasn't even been tested. What would have ever happened if the Wright brothers never flew? We probably wouldn't be flying. What would have happened if Apple never put together a computer? You wouldn't have those things out here. You have to test the theory before you can determine whether or not it's plausible or doable. And if it's at a small scale, which is the intent as I understand it, it seems pretty reasonable, especially if it's going to increase public safety. That's the whole thing about it. We can sit around and we can talk about all kind of bad things, how this thing can go haywire and stuff, but how would we know unless it's actually tested? You have to test it in order to come back. And could be EPD maybe say, hey, look, we tried this thing and this thing certainly doesn't work. We're already talking about the policy as being a test policy, and it was sunset along with at the period of time whether they decide that, okay, with the council's input and stuff, whether or not we're going to go in all the way or we're just going to pull it back out. All of the software, the facial recognition and stuff, I appreciate that. I have a computer that's facial recognition. But then there's real time too, where the officer is actually behind the vehicle and everybody else can see we live in a very open society. Everybody knows your car. If your friends or associates, they know your car, they know your license plate and everything else. I think that we are trying to not let something be tried to see if it reaps the actual benefits, and we're condemning it too early. Let's test it first and see how it goes.
Thank you, Jim. Chief?
Jesse, I was going to say that we'll just include language that says we won't use facial recognition software or license plate recognition software. I must not have heard you say that before.
Well, yeah. That was easy.
Jesse, that's for tonight.
That was sure easy.
Well, I guess I didn't see it being tied to this particular project.
So, yeah, thank you. If the administration is willing to put that in, it would alleviate concerns of commissioners, and that's good. So I was next, and then Joe. I just wanted to point out that the bottom of the pilot project, the last sentence is, after 18 months, the results of the program presented to the police commission for discussion to be determined whether the project should be continued, discontinued, or expanded. So it looks like they're willing to give us final cut, as they would say in the movie business. So we take a look at it and see after 18 months if you guys don't see any changes or results or something that's onerous to you, we can mold this into something that the commission wants. I want the commission to be a good consensus here, that everybody feels at least, if not happy with the result. I know there's some people that feel this is the camel's nose under the tent. We're getting into territory that's not something we want to go to, and I understand that. And so I want to make sure everybody is at least comfortable with the fact that we have 18 months to look at this and then decide. Our decision in the end can be not to go forward, or to modify it to a point where we see it fine. So I'm going to let Joe talk, and then we're going to have to cut it off because we're over time.
Okay. Couple things. First of all, regarding facial recognition software, that's one of the little $300 checkout cameras from CTV, and it picks faces out of the image, and it will track them on the screen. Okay, and it will change the lighting on the face if you go in and set that, and it will in fact correct red eye digitally. So in other words, in a $300 camera, you have that. So the ability to, as the chief said, we can put a clause in there saying we're just not going to do that. But facial recognition software is cheap. The thing that's expensive is access to bases with people's faces in them that you can go comparing against. So the software itself is very inexpensive. Essentially, The examples that have been given of camera systems have been sort of taking stuff after the fact. In other words, coming back and looking at the data in order to get information to find suspects and track them down. So the issue that you need in that particular situation is cameras pointed in many directions in order to make a system of that nature work. And briefly after the last meeting, there was some discussion about trying to get a hold of the businesses in the downtown that have cameras already and essentially putting together a network to determine where they're viewing, how many there are, and rather than simply having the police duplicate that, use the existing resources, put together some kind of a cooperative, idea with this, working with business and public, and then have the police department fill in some of those gaps. In other words, for less money, you can, with a cooperative effort, you can get a much larger coverage, because it all comes down to aiming the camera. If, the camera's pointed this way and the thing happens over here, you don't see it. Whereas if you have a larger network, you are able to go in after the fact and grab that information. So I would like to see some thought go into that, and maybe as part of this project, looking at that as a possibility. I think you leverage the resources that are already existent to do a better job.
Thank you. We've really discussed this a lot now, and I don't know if the commissioners are ready for us to approve the pilot project or whether we need to continue this to the next meeting. We brought it off the table, and we need to go ahead and have a motion to either approve it or...
I'd like to make a motion to approve this.
George has made the motion, James has seconded to approve the pilot project as presented by the administration. Now, further discussion on it, I sense Assistant Chief Durr had something he wanted to add to.
No, I just want to piggyback off Commissioner Tyndall. That is our intent. We wouldn't duplicate services or things. Looking at camera systems throughout the U.S., like Atlanta and things like that, they have a public-private partnership. So we would be looking to do that to not duplicate and if this was allowed to go forward. So that's definitely our intent.
Okay, can we take the vote? All those in favor of the motion to approve the project as presented, raise your hand. All opposed?
Ed, are you not voting?
I'm abstaining.
Is that allowed?
You're allowed to abstain.
Yeah, I think I'm going to abstain
Some committees are not
also.
allowed to abstain.
You're allowed.
We can't abstain at city council.
That's different.
5-2. Okay, the motion passes 5-2. We will continue with our agenda and go on to the vehicle pursuit policy implementation and training.
I'm going to make a little introduction.
Go right ahead.
This is Sergeant Damian San Miguel that you're about ready to meet. He's worked in our patrol division for 17 years. He was promoted to sergeant this last October. He's also been a member of our SWAT team for 11 years and is a member of the Emergency Vehicle Operations Training Team for 13 years, and he supervises that now. When he's not with the police department, he's an infantry battalion commander in the National Guard, and he's served our country for 23 years. He's deployed to Iraq, Mongolia, Japan, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Panama. And he spent 4.5 years on a tour of duty with the state's Weapons of Mass Destruction team, and you were the commander of the team, right?
Deputy Commander, sir.
Oh, okay. Sergeant San Miguel.
Okay, good evening. I'm Sergeant Damian San Miguel. I'm the Emergency Vehicle Operations Sergeant. Today I'm going to give you an information briefing on pursuit review, and it's going to capture stats from 2014 and then show 2013 so you can see a comparison on the change of the pursuit policy that took effect February 11th, 2014. So this is just basically intent of the briefing, which I just kind of discussed. So in 2014, we had a total number of vehicle pursuits were 4. Total number of officers involved were 5. That's because one was an FTO with a recruit. And then total number of vehicles damaged was 1. It was just minor damage. In 2013, the total number of vehicle pursuits we had were 22. Total number of officers involved were 75. And total number of vehicles damaged were 11. And that 75 also included other agencies, state police, LCSO canines, officers such as that. And then total number of vehicles damaged, 11. So 2014, agencies initiating the pursuit, all were EPD, were a total of 4. In 2013, 1 was a non-entry, that was just how was data entered. 18 were initiated by EPD, 1 was a patrol lieutenant, 2 were SPD, and that's the 22 captured. Recent pursuit was initiated for 2014 of the 4. 1 of them was a Dewey, 2 were traffic violations, and 1 was a wanted subject. And I didn't say this at the beginning, but if there's questions, please ask at any time. I can answer the questions. Accidents occurred during pursuits for 2014. 3 were no, and 1 was yes, and that was just that minor vehicle damage. So 2014, for pursuit justified, all 4 were not. All 4 were out of our current pursuit policy. Pretty self-explanatory. None were authorized to get in pursuit, and then none were within the pursuit policy. Yes, ma'am.
Why was the DUII in particular not considered within policy? Is that not posing a danger to the public?
Well, it's all about articulation, but right now, and I wish I could pull it up, but do you have a current pursuit policy in front of you? Yes. If you go to 314.2.1, when to initiate or continue a pursuit, it says right here, officers are authorized to initiate pursuit if the officer has reasonable belief that A, the suspect is engaged in the commission or attempt to commit a violent felony, which includes all felony offenses against persons, robbery, and arson, and related escape. Dewey does not fall under that. It is a misdemeanor crime. So if we try to stop a potential Dewey driver, and as soon as they blow a red light, and we initiate lights and sirens, we're in pursuit, which means we're not justified to pursue that Dewey.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. 2013, pursuit justified, 9 were not, 13 were out of that 22. And then out of that pursuit within policy, 12 were not within policy, 10 were within policy, which is that 22. And again, pursuit justified, it's that initiation of that pursuit, and then sometime during that course, during that pursuit, maybe it gets too dangerous or it falls outside of that parameters of the current policy. That's when it becomes that policy. That's the difference between those 2 numbers right there. Does that make sense? Okay. 2014, events that concluded pursuits. So these are reasons why they're stopped. 1, suspect stopped and eluded on foot. 1, the officer terminated, which is good. And then 1 was supervisor terminated, and then 1 was officer lost sight of the vehicle. So whenever an officer gets in a pursuit and they lose sight of the vehicle, there's no reason to pursue, they self-terminate. Pursuit policy. So this 2014, our pursuit policy is much more restrictive than the previous policy. Yes, ma'am.
And when did that switch happen?
The policy?
Yeah.
February 2014. So about just a little over a year ago.
Okay, thank you.
It happened, that's right.
When it took effect.
Yeah, but it also, we made the policy more restrictive in, I think, 2013, and realized the language wasn't clear enough and wasn't restrictive enough for my comfort, and so we changed it again in 14. So it had 2 iterations.
Thank you.
So you can see the pursuit policy has significantly reduced the number of pursuits that we've been in from 2013 to 2014. And no pursuits in 14 met the current pursuit policy for the criteria to continue the pursuit or to even initiate it. Identify concerns in training. Pursuit policy has reduced number of pursuits, therefore new patrol officers will not have the experience in pursuit driving. So officers will still get experience in Code 3 driving, but as you can see, all of our pursuits last year were not authorized. And so as new officers come, they're not ever going to probably get in a pursuit. And so the concern is 5, 6 years down the road, when they're justified, they haven't had the experience. They'll have the training, but the experience they won't have. So that's why training, recommended implementation, recommend more time for EVO training, specifically for the patrol division, when it comes to Code 3 driving and then pursuit driving. And then recommend more PIT training for the patrol division. PIT is a way we can stop a vehicle that we're authorized to. And so it's a technique that you can stop the vehicle pretty much after you pit it, depending on how fast it's going, maybe 5, 6 seconds, 7 seconds later, it stops and you pin it, and then you can, the pursuit is stopped, but you still got to deal with the custody and stuff. So that, yes, sir.
Please clarify Code 3.
Code 3 is lights and sirens, where you're responding from wherever you are to the location you're dispatched to, and you use lights and sirens. That's Code 3 driving.
Thank you.
The best training that we're going to have for our officers right now when it comes to the new pursuit policy is professional discussion and adult conversations. And that's talking about scenarios, and that's giving them, it's going to be judgment, and it's going to be good decision making on the officers to know when to initiate the pursuit and to follow that policy. So basically it's people like me continually talking during in-service training about it. It's sergeants talking to their patrol officers at briefing about the pursuit policy. And it's the FTOs talking to the new recruits that come in, that we train. They're going to be the biggest part of that new recruits training period, because they're in that car for 5 weeks at a time with one officer, and they're going to need to really discuss with them, proper Code 3 driving, proper pursuit driving, knowing when you're justified to get in that pursuit, knowing when, even if you're justified, knowing when you come out of that policy and you have to terminate the pursuit. So again, professional discussions and adult conversations with the officers and the supervisors. And really, the watch commander and the sergeants understanding the pursuit policy, and then briefing their expectations to officers, and then inspecting those expectations, as well as the officers knowing what to expect from their chain of command. And again, it's just professional discussion that they need to have. Does that make sense? Sustained annual EVO enforceable stops training. We definitely want to keep what we have right now. We're doing in-service training this month for forcible stops, so we want to maintain that. And then pursuit policy review. It's set, but we need to continually have that discussion with our officers. Improve pursuit management. That's getting all the lieutenants and all the sergeants on patrol to understand the pursuit policy. Most importantly, to be speaking the same thing to the officers, so there's a clear understanding, and officers on different watches aren't getting inconsistent answers when they ask questions. Does that make sense? We want to be speaking the same thing. More pursuit and forcible stops training for the patrol division. Professional development training for the emergency vehicle operations instructors. I think it's important for our instructors to know what kind of training opportunities are out there, so they can bring something back and train it if there's something we can do better. As well as synchronization of EPD and other law enforcement agencies in Lane County for pursuit and forcible stops policy development and training. So what does that mean? Right now, we can only pursue for that criteria for felony crimes that are person crimes, or under extraordinary circumstances where the watch commander authorizes it, or during when a designated temporarily, when the chief of police or designee temporarily authorizes a vehicle pursuit for a circumstance or crime not included in the above. That would be a deliberate pre-planned event where it's authorized by the chief or by somebody with that decision-making authority. One thing about this is that we can only pursue for these 3 items right here. Springfield Police, they can pursue for traffic violations and above. Lane County can pursue for traffic violations and above. So oftentimes, those agencies can come into the city of Eugene and pursue for traffic violation, but we can't support them in that pursuit. So we try to block traffic and as safely get them out of the city as possible. So one of the best things to do is to be working with the other agencies and trying to get a policy that is mutually supportive. And I would find that to be much more effective.
That's frustrating.
It's challenging, but the key thing is just the lieutenants and the sergeants assigned to the patrol division being speaking the same language and communicating the same message to the patrol officers. I'm a firm believer if we're all communicating the same message to the officers and the officers understand it, we can be effective. So when it really pertains to training, I think the training we need to sustain, but how the new pursuit policy is going to affect our training, it's going to be a lot more discussion again. And that's really what it comes down to. And a lot of scenario training for the officers, and showing a lot of video of pursuits that have gone bad, why it's gone bad, and then techniques they could have done better.
I mean, I think this is, I'm sorry, do we need to do a cue? Bob?
Go ahead, Bill.
Okay. I guess, I think it's great. I think people don't realize just how dangerous a car going 80 miles an hour, or three of them going 80 miles an hour down the street, how many people that could actually hurt. But what was it that made the department decide to make this more restrictive? Was there incidents that happened, or was it just, because, I mean, I know some departments have done this many years ago, kind of what, no pursuit policies, but what made us?
Yeah, some departments have gone there many years ago, and some haven't done this yet.
Yeah.
And our neighboring agencies aren't as restrictive as ours, which is a frustration for our officers who want to be supportive of their fellow officers in their efforts to capture somebody that they're interested in arresting, but know that from our policy they're not allowed to. The agencies that have previously gone to this normally do that only following some horrible catastrophe where officers or children or families are killed because officers are chasing some, meth-addicted felon or meth-addicted offender at high speeds. But I didn't want to wait for that, and so, and it's, there's so much evidence to support, in my view, not everybody agrees with this policy. There's so much evidence to support restricting these in an effort to reduce the loss of life that occurs from pursuits. And then the last thing is that I'll mention is that we're working in a county where we arrest people following these pursuits that are often deadly pursuits. We're chasing people that if we catch them and arrest them are only going to spend a minute or two in jail. And so really why are we risking our officers' lives and the public's lives in order to chase them down when the evidence showed from the reports and the studies that we saw that most officers believe that pursuing people makes them more dangerous. And most drivers that are fleeing from officers drive more safely within a block or two of the end of the pursuit. So those are all the reasons that.
Did you?
No.
I had a similar question, but I think we've been fortunate in Eugene that we haven't had, as far as I know, at least not in recent years, a death related to a police pursuit, but I think it might have been in Oak Ridge maybe 10 years ago that a police officer was engaged in a vehicle pursuit and killed a 90-year-old woman sitting waiting to make a left turn in traffic. And not to contradict you, Chief, but to add, I think the police auditor had also looked at the data around vehicle pursuit when he started his role with the current police auditor, and at least he shared with council that that was something he wanted to work with the department, was to reduce the number of times that there were high-speed driving through the city because he felt it was more of a danger to the public than it was a benefit. Thank you for the presentation. It was really good. But so I will ask, I support the change in the policy. I think it's good. I think what you've shown us demonstrates that. But I do want to know, can you think of instances, or do you feel that the more restrictive policy has interfered with officers' ability to apprehend criminals, not necessarily just traffic violators, or maybe what the policy would allow Springfield police officers to do, but do you feel like there's been any downside?
That can be challenging to answer, just because I haven't, no one's received the information, analyzed it, and then came with the outcome of it.
Gotcha.
I mean, those 4 pursuits right there were traffic violation warrants, right. and even some under one of our old policy, that warrant we wouldn't be authorized if we knew who the person was to pursue it and stuff. I mean, it would be it's hard to answer that question because the analysis hasn't been done, ma'am.
Well, so I do think that's a question the public would have as well, and I'm sure you're keeping a close watch to make sure that you're balancing, those competing challenges of catching the bad guys and protecting the public while you do it. That's partly why we exist here at this table.
Sergeant, do we arrest people after we've terminated pursuits? Do we arrest the offenders after we terminate the pursuits?
If we don't find them, we won't arrest them. I mean, I hope I mentioned that right.
Yeah, I get what I'm trying to, I was hoping you would answer, so I wouldn't have to, is that we often arrest the driver even after the pursuit's been terminated.
You mean you find them in another way?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's, that was the training, is to encourage our officers to think creatively to find a safer way to still make the apprehension.
So rather than chasing, you do more detective work and investigate and
Chief, if I can elaborate, one technique is, I get where the chief is going. One technique is a lot of times, even if we terminate a pursuit or if we lose them, 9 times out of 10 when they don't see the cop cars anymore, they stop and then they go to ground. And so if you can still saturate the area without being in pursuit, you can more likely not find a vehicle. Once you find a vehicle, you establish a perimeter, call in a canine, and then oftentimes we can. And that is an effective way to catch the suspect in the vehicle.
That's good to hear. So this isn't, are there any other changes or restrictions that you've done in terms of the Code 3 usage, not necessarily related to pursuit?
So when it comes to Code 3 driving, for training purposes?
No, just in terms of when is Code 3 authorized in general, beyond the pursuit piece?
Well, for example, Code 3 would be authorized if a officer is contacting somebody and it gets dangerous for the officer, or he or she feels it's in danger, or they get in a fight, they'll ask for a Code 3 response, and officers will respond Code 3. If it's a call for service where dispatch will describe that there's a domestic dispute, a male and a female, and there's a weapon involved, and there's a fight in progress, officers will respond Code 3. And if they're not, the supervisor will tell them to respond Code 3. But when we're receiving information from dispatch, for example, that parties are separated and that one person's across the street, and the person, if there's no weapons involved, we'll go from Code 3 back to Code 1 and get there in a timely manner, but not, violating 820, 320. We don't need to go through red lights. We don't need to go through stop signs. We can follow all traffic laws.
Great. And the reason, thank you, the reason I bring that up is because, again, in conversations with the police auditor, he has said, if, from his perspective, if he sees EPD officers driving down the road with the lights flashing and the sirens going, something very serious needs to be going on. And that was his goal. And it sounds like you guys are reflecting that as well in terms of the usage of those kind of high-speed, not pursuits, but even usage of the cars. And then this is just a curiosity. There was a recent vehicle that crashed into the front of the Elkhorn Brewery. Was that a pursuit? Does anyone?
Familiar with it?
No.
Springfield Police
That's what I thought.
into Eugene.
There's an example of what you were talking about. All right, those were my questions and comments. Thank you.
Yeah, Joe, Tamara, and Jesse.
Yeah, Mike, as you were, talking about this, the question, I guess, comes up in terms of technology. Have the in-car videos been able to get license plates in some of these cases? Has that been useful?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I mean, the in-car video is great. The officers like it a lot. Everyone's a big supporter of in-car video.
But the issue would be that if you have a pursuit of this nature and you're able to get close enough to get what would be a recognition, do folks stop and say, okay, we're just going to play the video, get the number, and then go get these guys?
Well, there's some thought they have to put into it. I mean, you'd have to identify the driver. Just because you have the license plate and the make and model of the car, you got to identify the driver, develop probable cause, make sure they're the driver of the car when it actually happened, they didn't give it to somebody else, or it's not an unreported stolen vehicle. So there's some investigative work to do, but in-car video is very supportive of that.
Okay, good. The second thing would be the question, I mean, we brought up in the past, in terms of technology, the concept of a drone. In your opinion, would something like that, if you have the potential for pursuit, or even Springfield or other communities, just bringing up a drone and following the car?
Well, drone's a big issue in the United States right now because of Privacy Act. Privacy. I mean, when I was in Iraq, we used them all the time. They were effective. Here, it's a different story, though. I mean, we have a constitution, and we got to follow it and stuff. And then there's a lot of was it FAA requirements and legalities to go with it.
I'm not suggesting launching a missile at the car.
Oh, no, it's just capturing, it's
Even the
capturing an image.
FAA.
It's a big deal and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I know large law enforcement agencies that have helicopters with officers, in the air. You don't have to get in pursuit. You can just have a helicopter fly over it and give direction of travel when they stop. I mean, then you can set up a perimeter and stuff.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah, Tamara and Jesse?
I was going to make a joke about license plate readers coming in handy in this situation, but I was just kidding, Jesse. So in the case of the reason I asked about the DUI, I was thinking, I've seen, wrong way drivers who are on a freeway who are under the influence that would be considered a DUI. But instead of pursuing them, which might cause them to continue driving or cause them to be confused, you just go about getting that person off the road in a different way. That's why a pursuit in that case wouldn't be justified.
Well, here's an example.
I mean, I know it's not
The
justified.
Dewey driver comes up quite a bit of officers because they can be very dangerous. So if we're following a vehicle and they show the indications of being a potential Dewey driver, and as soon as we light them up, turn on our lights and our sirens to get them to stop, and if they continue on and they're swerving and then they say they blow a red light, or they go through a stop sign without making a stop, or they start accelerating through especially a stop sign or a stop light, and we go through it as well. Once we have to re-clear it, technically we're in pursuit. And so just that criteria right there, we can't pursue that Dewey driver. Now, if you're pursuing a Dewey driver and you have probable cause to believe that they are a Dewey driver, I mean, right now, we are authorized to box them or pit them to get them to a stop without initiating the pursuit. But you have to have a lot of probable cause to be able to do that and to make sure that it is a Dewey driver. Does that answer your
that's
question?
the way it was, thank you. That answers my question.
Good, thank you. Jesse?
But several years ago, before I was on the police commission, it was a nice summer evening, we were walking back from the park toward our house, and all of a sudden a car comes flying through with umpteen police cars behind it, and they were just flying through. Like if you're walking down the street in our neighborhood, you're walking on the street. There's a lot of people out. What was clear in that situation is it was not the police, it was the idiot running from the police who was in control of the situation, and they were just following along. That was the first time I met the police chief. There was a lot of neighbors were upset. He came out to Councilor Ortiz's house and listened to us. I wasn't on the police commission yet. That inspired me to want to apply. I think this is a great policy. I think it's an example of how EPD and the chief are ahead of, listening to public concerns and ahead of the country on policies. And I'm just glad that this is in place. Thanks.
Okay, I'll take a motion to approve the policy as presented.
No, this is a policy.
It's just a report.
This has been in place.
Policy is already. I misunderstood, I thought you revised something in the policy. I wasn't aware you didn't.
You could move to commend it.
I'd like to make a motion to get rid of this policy.
We're to the next phase of our night, one that everybody's
Nice to meet you.
happy with, I'm sure, and that's the commission
Thank you,
closing
Sergeant.
remarks. So, where do you would like to start tonight? Closing remarks, commissioners, do you have anything? Claire, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I really appreciate the way the chair has handled moderating both the citizen filming policy discussion and and also with the public and the pilot project discussion of CCTV. I really appreciate how you've been moderating our discussion and reflecting concerns of the community, and I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Anybody else have anything they'd like to add? Jesse, and then James, and then George.
As far as the CCTV policy, I think there's a great policy in place. I could not have supported the idea of the government putting cameras out there to watch people. I just can't get over that, but I'm happy with the policy. I think a lot of good work was done on it.
Good. Thank you. James and then George.
Yeah, well, I just want to say that each time that I have the opportunity, the privilege to come here and I have these discussions and stuff about these very vital policies and how it impact the community, I just want to thank all of my fellow commissioners and stuff for, just being sincere and just being here to do the work. It's very important stuff. A lot of people won't take on this task. And more importantly, the leadership position as well. Thank you.
Thank you, George.
Yeah, thank you. You guys are a delight to work with. I also did want to thank the public for coming, because somehow, at least I theorize, there's this incredibly, I'm going to use untrue belief out there that we're going to try and stop something that is your constitutional right. You have all the right to do it in the world, and so I'm really glad to well, there are only not that many left over that came by, and I hope coming to the trough and getting what I think is the truth, to squelch the rumors, and I hope that the public goes out and it does some corrective action on what is, they have all the right in the world to film the police at any time they want. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else tonight? Cameron?
So I had the opportunity and privilege of being called up for jury duty last month and serving on a jury. Let me just say that if you don't want to be on a jury, you might not want to mention that you're on the police commission when they ask you if you know any police, because apparently that gets you on the jury and gets you elected the foreperson. So what I wanted to say was that it was a 2-day trial, and one of the officers is one of your female officers that was involved in an assault case, and I just wanted to commend her for her professional demeanor in the courtroom. The entire trial, she was very engaged with the defense, with the prosecutor, with the prosecutor, and she gave really professional testimony on the stand, and she's a younger, officer she's not as experienced as some of the officers we've seen, and I was just really impressed with her in court and her demeanor and her professionalism. So I wanted to say that.
Good. Thank you. Anybody else? Bill?
I just wanted to say, I think Jeremy sent it out in last week's mailings, is that the award ceremony is in May, the officers. Yes. And I went to that last year, and that was a great ceremony, and I think that we should all try to attend that if possible. Make sure you get the date and time out to us, Jeremy. That would be great.
Thank you. Jeremy has really done a great job since taking over. Had some big shoes to fill for Carter. He's been making sure the diligence that he's put into this has really impressed me, so I'm happy that we have somebody who's working so hard. I'd like to thank and reverse this and thank the commission for the civil attitude here. I know these issues are very important, and in some cases, goes to the essence of some people's beliefs, and I'm aware of that. When you get into people's belief system and you're messing with it, the first thing you want to do is defend those beliefs. So I'm aware of that, and I'm glad that everybody has a chance to speak, and that's what my goal is, to make sure nobody gets excluded from any talking here, that we all get it out on the table. You guys have done a great job in doing that, and that's why we're getting things done faster now. I think Tamara and I both agreed that we're moving along quickly, and we're going to get our work plan done, hopefully, in the next 2 months and move on. So thank you very much for the concerted effort by everybody. And thank the public again for your concern coming tonight. You people that are here obviously care very much about your city and your government, and we appreciate your support and your help and your comments especially. Thank you very much. Does anybody else have anything? With that, we'll adjourn.
All right.
Good night.
I'm on vacation now.
I heard.
Is that what the Hawaiian shirt's for?
Yeah, just to rub it in.
George, that's not important. You've only mentioned it 3 times.
Oh, yeah. I'll tell you what, I went to Cuba, which was not a vacation. You want to hear something? The bus, the tour bus was hit with a baseball. Hit with a baseball. Police came, inspected people with the for a baseball.
Like about
5 hours.
people are passionate about their position.
Downtown, I mean, it was just.
You have to let
were talking about the.
Police chief. I don't know.
I was appreciating everything.
I thought about conversation with someone. Willingness of the couple. Police profiling the citizens. I think nothing is part of the profiling of their uniform. Really? So blue is a color we can discriminate on. They can do everything they want.
I love your time. Yes, thank you for your votes.
They record all this, they're all. Because I've got an system. Good job. So I can give them
And do you know, I know that it was impossible for me to be able to get really far down from there. So do you know how you get there?
They've sort of made it across what I got that, although there are ways to do it. But the main thing I think is
Some of the cameras.
probably, you can explain the, we're still on the.
Step out in the hall.
Help yourself, whatever you like.
Now,
You know, the cameras are all.
he's now got
Blow a myth or what?
like Eugene, you can care all those things. So,
Oh, you know.
and do what they do, you know, the system comes back. So I would guess half the downtown guys have cameras with that. Oh, and they can also set permission. So they can set it up so that people can all outside cameras, but they couldn't see what was going on.
There's some situations where
So,
people just do it.
but you also have to get files off of it. There are some situations where they do.
I don't know if it was.
Yeah, someone's gonna call her and talk to her about sharing her
It's kind of like, you know,
Or if he just.
I feel that if I
I got her contact information before she left.
I'm not sure what I said.
I'm happy to help her do it, and I wanted to see if I could get a copy of her part of the thing anyway, so that would. I'm positive.
You know, there's a lot of.
Yeah, and I definitely got Carol's information. That's your job.
Dollar figure.
I think they have it, if you don't, because it's a good way for everybody to be able to give their opinion on the perspective.
Well, I can totally help
Perspective
in whatever way.
one person's best ability to be able to have that big
People can look at one thing. Not that I'm running for anything.
That's what I'm saying, yeah, so it doesn't change the fact that it's actually, you know, like, that's in that position, you should probably be able to actually, all the controls of these
You can't do that.
just turn it off now.
I couldn't even find the.
2 words for you, Rosemary,
Otherwise,
That in case.
he's too young to know buildings, right?
Yeah.
Pete,